Hello, today's lecture is one of my favorite. Um, the topic is not covered in the textbook, but I thought it is a very important topic for a course on international business. And today we're going to talk about economic effects of immigration, a topic that is often misunderstood, a topic that is definitely a cornerstone of most of the presidential and other elections, a topic that many people have very strong opinions about, and at the same time few have studied it in sufficient depth to say something about it. What I mean here is that if you take 10 people on the street, off the street, anyone on the street, and ask them what they think should be done about immigration, all 10 will have very strong opinions. But then if you ask those 10, have they ever read anything on immigration, any empirical studies on economic effects of immigration, I bet out of 10, 10 will say no. Out of 100, probably 99 will say no. At most, they might have read something about immigration in magazines or maybe in newspapers and whatever's TV saying during the election season. But hardly anyone actually read economic research on immigration. At the same time, much research has been done and we understand fairly well what effects immigration has on economy as well as society. And so this is what we're going to discuss today. There are obviously some negative effects, there are some positive effects. I'm going to give you all of those. I don't really care what opinion you will have about economic effects of immigration at the end of this lecture. What matters to me is that you know arguments for and against, and most importantly you have the empirical evidence that shows what the effects are. So as long as you know that, you're free to formulate your opinion at that point. But again, before then, unfortunately, most people play or go by their emotions and very, very limited knowledge. And so here we go. We will be talking about immigration, whether it's good or bad for America. We will also be talking about immigration, whether it's good or bad for South Africa. Now watch what's happening here. If I ask you about immigration and its effects on America, people tend to think, well, all those Mexicans come to America, so I don't know, maybe negative, stealing jobs, or maybe positive. I mean, obviously America is a country of immigrants. But then when you ask them about, for example, immigration to South Africa or South America, many people are like, oh, they have immigration there? I don't know about them. And so what's interesting here is that when you will be doing the homework, and your homework, by the way, will be you wake up tomorrow morning and all immigrants have been kidnapped by aliens. Like there are no immigrants left in the country. What's going to happen to unemployment, wages, prosperity, and all those kinds of things? I strongly recommend that you don't think about America. You focus on, for example, South Africa, or you focus on Germany, or whatever country you choose. That will take that emotional ideological aspect out of the picture, and you will think much more clearly. Now, we'll also talk about the benefits of immigrant labor as well as downsides of immigrant labor, who benefits in home country, host country, and basically who's the winner and who's the loser, all right? Now, obviously there are two main views on immigration, positive and negative. In a very simplistic form, those who believe that immigration is good, they say, well, first, those who believe that immigration is bad. Immigration is bad because they take here and take jobs and eat our bread. That's kind of the standard claim. So if it was not for all those immigrants, we would have so many more jobs, right? And this claim is common but not prevalent in the United States, but it's definitely a very common view on immigration in some other countries that are much more nationalistic, perhaps not nationalistic, less tolerant of immigrants. Like go to France, for example, or go to Germany, or go to Japan, and you will see a much stronger negative view about immigration. And so that's the argument there. So they come, take our jobs, and use the things that we built, or eat our bread. Those who believe that immigration is good normally say something like this. Well, an immigrant is a person who is ready to start being productive for the society from day one. Society, in order to survive, needs new people, and normally the new people come from where? We obviously make babies, right? The thing with the babies is that it takes about 18 years and sometimes even longer before the baby can do something for the society. So you have to feed, uh, dress, provide shelter and all that stuff for a train, teach for a young member of the society until that person is strong enough to go and do something for the society. An immigrant is like that. The only thing is that somebody else trained him or her, dressed, provided shelter, and so on and so on and so on. And the person who comes here as an immigrant usually is ready to start giving back to the society from day one. Now, I'm not saying that all the babies should be substituted with immigrants, obviously not. But strictly speaking, there is nothing wrong with the idea of immigration. I mean, as long as the member of the society comes and does something, that's good for the society. Especially in a country like the United States, where more and more people are retiring, and the ratio of employed to retired people is becoming closer to 1 to 1. It's not quite there yet. At this time, it's about 1 to 4. Once baby boomers are out and retired, it's going to be more like 1 to 2, and so something needs to be done, because either those who retire will not have the same quality of life, or those who work will have to pay higher taxes to support those who have retired. And so one of the ideas how to smooth out the transition is to either have more babies, but it's kind of too late now. Even if you go and have sex now, it's going to be another 20 years, 10, 15, 18 years before the baby is out doing something there, working for your taxes, I mean for your Social Security. Immigration kind of can help smooth out that spike in the birth rate 65 years ago. Anyway, those are two main ideas. Now, before we go and start talking about positive and negative effects of immigration, I want to give you a little history of immigration. The truth is that particularly in southern states like North Carolina, it's not that people have negative effects or views about immigration. In fact, most Americans, unlike, by the way, again, people in some other countries, most Americans recognize the value of immigration. Again, come on, many of you and or your parents, grandparents were also immigrants, right? So Americans don't have problems with immigration. At the same time, there is still certain dissatisfaction. All those, again, like in the American context, it would be Latin Americans or maybe some Asians, who knows. You go to Japan, those would be Chinese. You go to Russia, those would be, I don't know, like for example, people from all those Tajikistan, Uzbekistans, and so on and so on. So every country has somebody whom they're not very happy with, and that's where most of the immigration comes from. So there is certain dissatisfaction. And so I've noticed when I was teaching this lecture in the earlier semesters, when I was talking about negative effects of immigration, people were like, yeah, we know about that. When I was talking about positive effects of immigration, people were like, yeah, that's blah, blah, blah. No, I don't believe you. So they were not necessarily receptive of these I wouldn't call them radical views, but some of the things that you don't hear commonly, right? So therefore, I decided to start this lecture with some history that hopefully will set your mind on the right wavelength, so that you are a little bit more open to some of the ideas that you may have not heard much growing up. So first, are low skill, poor immigrants bad in the long run? So obviously in the United States, nobody seems to have problem with immigrants, for example, from Germany. Like nobody complains about Albert Einstein coming here and living here and doing stuff, or Keanu Reeves, for example, who by the way is Canadian. So the guy from Matrix, again, he was born, I think it was South Africa or something like that. So, no, hold on, Lebanon, like Beirut, yeah. And then he lived in Canada and grew up there and then immigrated to the United States. Nobody has problems with guys like that, or Jim Carrey, or whoever else, all those Nobel Prize winners. So most people don't have problems with those immigrants. People have problems with immigrants who come here often without language skills, often perhaps even illegally, and we'll talk about legal-illegal distinction later on in terms of economic effects. But if I may sound stereotypical here, or if I wanted to kind of sound stereotypical, it would be we're talking here about people from Latin America, right? So that's what Americans have problems with. We'll talk about whether it's good or bad later on, but now let's talk about that. So are those immigrants good or bad? Well, let me give you some historical excursus here. There have been a number of major waves of immigration into North America, Canada, the United States primarily, right? Many of those immigrants who came were poor, uneducated, funny looking, sometimes seemingly uncultured, often criticized or have been criticized for lowering wage, taking jobs, contaminating local superior culture and all that stuff. And you hear that a lot about people now. So people who come here perhaps from from Cuba to pretty much all of Latin America, perhaps even Africa, maybe even some Asia. Now consider this: there have been several waves of immigration. So somewhat 200 years ago, it was the Irish who were coming here. 150 years ago. Then it was Italians, Eastern Europeans, Chinese. Then Second World War, refugees of World War, again mainly Eastern Europeans, other Europeans, many Jews during that time. Now the thing is, and this is very important, that at that time all those people were basically the Mexicans of of their time. When the Irish came, lots of jokes about them. People thought that they, are incapable of becoming real Americans. Like for example, here there is a cartoon from 1889, right? And so that cartoon basically shows an Irish guy who doesn't fit or go into the melting pot of the United States. And so at that time, the stereotype was that the Irish are so different that they are unmixable in America's melting pot. And so the way people perceived the Irish at that time, it was much worse than you would sometimes hear about the minorities today. Now this cartoon here is from 1850, and this cartoon is basically accusing the Irish and German immigrants of negatively affecting an election. And so again, as you can see, one is portrayed as a whiskey drinker, the other one is portrayed as a beer drinker. And at that time, again, the Anglo majority thought that the Irish, Germans, they basically wouldn't be good enough for American society. So there is nothing good coming out of those countries. Now again, today obviously we know that without the Irish, without Germans, without just about any other major component of American fabric now, America wouldn't be what it is now. I mean, come on, without Conan Browne, America wouldn't be the same. And there are many other prominent figures from Ireland. In fact, the Kennedys are of Irish descent, right? So obviously, again, now we know that Irish are not only a good fit for America, they are an important part of America. But again, it wasn't believed that at all times. So there was a time when they were perceived, and again, it sounds stereotypical, but yes, they were basically the Irish of the 1800s. So I mean, the Latin Americans of the 1800s here in the United States. Now, this cartoon comes from 1888, and it depicts a poor, blue-blooded American whose family is starving to death, while all those festive immigrants come and steal his jobs, right? And so again, we are talking here about the time when the Irish were coming here, and the concerns at that time were exactly as they are today. They come, they agree to work for a lower wage, they steal our jobs, and they basically undermine the prosperity of our country. Now, and this is very important, any of your ancestors came around that time? Well, at the time when they came, this is how they were perceived. Come, steal jobs, make America worse off. Looking back at that time, looking back 100, 150 years ago, we know that those are the people who made America great, right? So those are the people without whom America wouldn't be today where it is. But at that time, the view was this. Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a prophet, obviously. I don't know what's going to happen. But if the history repeats itself, and it does have the tendency to repeat itself, 100 years from now, 150 years from now, when your grandchildren will be looking back and they will be told that there was time, for example, there were times or time early, like 1990s, 2010, 2020, that many Americans were extremely against Mexicans, for example, coming here. And some states would even pass laws that were, in views of many discriminatory against Latinos or other immigrants. Your children, grandchildren will look at you and say, like, really? That was the case? I mean, all these people that now constitute a major and important part of American society, at that time you looked at them as, as funny looking and, poor coming here still in our jobs. I predict that that's what's going to happen. I mean, who knows? It may go differently. But if history goes as it's been going for who knows how long, this is what's going to happen. And some of the views that are commonplace today, in fact, some of the views that determine election outcomes today, will look so funny, so unjust, and perhaps even so filthy, just another 100 years later. Just wait and watch. And yes, I guess this is almost a cruel joke here, but yeah, I'm not sure if I have any Native American students here in my class. But again, just kind of a little reminder that we all have, you all, I guess, I'm still a guest here, but you all at some time also were guests here. So again, this is not to say, and I hope you didn't get it wrong, this is not to say that somebody is bad or somebody is good, or somebody is right or somebody is wrong. I'm just saying that what we see today is nothing new, and we've seen it many times, at least 3 times in the United States with different waves of immigration. And so the concerns that we have today are very similar, in fact identical to those that have your grandparents had and your parents had, and so on and so on. Looking back today, we understand that our ancestors in many cases were wrong. And just keep that in mind, that there is a possibility that perhaps some of the views that some people here in the United States hold perhaps prevent them from seeing a larger picture. And so let's talk about that. Well, first, some statistics. Where immigrants are? Well, most of them obviously are in Canada, the United States, Europe, Middle East, and Australia. Now, if I asked you what country has the largest immigrant population as a percentage of population, as a percentage, not as the total number of immigrants, but as percentage, what would you say? And the truth is that the largest population is somewhere here, like all those Kuwaits and Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. So they don't have a large number, but because the population is fairly small there, they have a huge percentage of immigrants. In fact, some of those countries have like 89% of the population are immigrants. Now, the truth is that most of those people would be from other neighboring countries, so it wouldn't be Europeans or North Americans. Those would be people from other Middle Eastern countries, but yes, they have a huge immigration population as a percentage, but again, most of them would be from other Arab countries, so it would be the same language, the same culture, more or less, so it's not such, not the same type of immigration as you would, consider here. Now, then we have Australia and Canada, with roughly 25% of all people living in those countries being from somewhere else, so not being born in that country. The United States follows at about 20%, and then Europe. And again, in Europe, it's kind of tough to quantify immigration. Now that Europe is one union, I mean, a German guy goes to Austria, technically it's immigration, right? But on the other hand, it's probably like, like you go from North Carolina to South Carolina. I mean, there is bigger difference, but I mean, the American states sometimes are more different than countries of Europe. So, but obviously there is much intra-European immigration, and so people move a lot, even though it may not be such a long way. Now, when you look at this map, by the way, what's interesting here, and that's your first indicator about the economic effects of immigration, you would see that the regions that have the greatest number of immigrants are also the regions that are most developed, the wealthiest regions. Now, we don't know what the cause and effect here is yet, and we'll discuss that a little later, but it seems like immigration, if it's not the cause of all that wealth that those regions have, then at least it's definitely not stalling their development. I mean, these countries are basically, these regions, at least North America, Australia, Middle East, those countries, most of the immigration there occurred within the last, 50 years, 100 years, maybe 150 years. And so obviously the countries haven't slowed down their progress during that time. So at the very least, immigration doesn't seem to hurt economic progress. Many would actually say that this is precisely why those countries are so prosperous, because of those immigrants. Obviously, you can counter this argument and say that, well, maybe immigrants go where life is good, and maybe, the only reason they have so many immigrants because they've been so developed. But again, obviously, all that immigration didn't make them worse off, it looks like. And so again, ask yourself, if all those immigrants didn't come to the United States or Canada or Australia, would those countries be as well off today as they are? Just, that's the first little hint. In the United States, that's where immigrants are. And so obviously, where they are, where they come from, and not surprisingly, geography is an important factor here. So along the US-Mexico border, there are many Latin Americans and Mexicans. Florida has many Cubans, and so on and so on and so on. Now, here is your first question. Where is the immigrant to locals ratio is the highest? Again, we're talking about percentage here. And the correct answer is Qatar. Well, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Middle East. Technically and strictly speaking, the highest immigrant population is in Vatican. The entire population of the country, and Vatican has the status of a country, is immigrant. So in fact, they don't give permanent passports. You are a citizen of the country only as long as you work there. And so when your job stops, you have to surrender your passport and you become a citizen of the country where you came from again. But as long as you work there, you are a citizen of Vatican, and so nobody becomes a citizen of Vatican by birth. So everyone has to be basically naturalized immigrant there. Now, first, let's discuss who is a stakeholder in immigration. So we're going to talk about effects of immigration on immigrants themselves, on countries that they leave, countries that they come to, as well as citizens of the country where immigrants come to. And so let's see first about immigrants themselves. Well, first, before we get to pros and cons, I'd like to highlight that immigrants normally immigrate voluntarily. There is a possibility that some have to escape their country for, to escape political prosecution or something else, war perhaps. Those might have not been immigrating otherwise, but here they have no choice, and so to survive they have to immigrate, and in that case immigration is not really voluntary. But in most cases immigrants decide to come to a different country, and presumably they did some research first, and if they decided to immigrate, chances are that's because they feel or think that their life in the country where they're going to will be better. And so hopefully that means, or probably that means, that there will be more pros than cons of immigration for immigrants. And so there are many pros here. Well, obviously more opportunities, perhaps better jobs, maybe higher pay, maybe more respect, maybe more opportunities for growth. In fact, most of the immigration worldwide occurs because of search for opportunities, mainly economic opportunities. Opportunity to gain new experiences, maybe have new unique knowledge, cultural, technical, often more freedom. I mean, the truth is that many people immigrate not for economic reasons, but they search places or seek places that are more free. Standards of living, and maybe even adventure. Some people, in fact, I'm now in Colombia as I'm recording this lecture, and so interestingly I teach a course here, and there are 16 students in the class. Of those, 3 are American, 3 Danes, and 1 guy from India. And so it looks to me that at least for Americans, a big reason why they came here is in search of adventure, and so that may be a reason too. Now, there are many negatives of being an immigrant. Well, first of all, you leave your family and friends behind, and unfortunately there is really nothing you can do about that. If you move a lot, or even once, you basically inject yourself with almost like a virus of being permanently dissatisfied with where you live. I grew up in Ukraine. I left Ukraine for the first time when I was 16. I lived in Germany, in Texas, in Canada, now in North Carolina, a number of places, right? The problem is that you settle down in each of those places, you make friends, and then you leave. And you leave important social relationships behind. So no matter where you then settle down, there will be always something missing in your life. So for me, no matter what country I go now to, Canada, the United States, Ukraine, Germany, any of those countries, there will be a lot missing in my life because I can't take my friends with me. So my only ideal solution would be if all those countries decided to become one, and if all those countries decided to become, all my friends came to the same town and decided to live there, and I settled there. So I guess in that case I would be pretty much more satisfied, but even then I would be missing, for example, I don't know, maybe Canadian mountains, or maybe North Carolina's, yes, right, shore, or maybe, I don't know, Germany's technical museum. Who knows what else you would be missing, right? Geography, climate. And so unfortunately that's a big loss. Sometimes I think maybe it wasn't so wrong or so bad when people would grow up in the same town with the same people, die there, first have family there, then die there, so they would have, I can clearly see how they may be even happier than all those people, immigrants, who move a lot these days. Now, the thing is also that when you immigrate, And that also applies to Americans going elsewhere, but even more so to people going to a different country like America. um, your knowledge and much of your expertise and experience expires. You knew how to do things, you knew people, you had a diploma, you had all kinds of things, and you come to a new country and all of a sudden your diploma is not recognized, your degree is not recognized. Whatever you knew how to do business, for example, in India or China or Ukraine, all of a sudden that doesn't matter here at all. Uh, whatever achievements you had probably don't matter either, and so therefore you often see, for example, a cab driver who has a PhD in whatever field from India, who's a cab driver here, and so unfortunately all those achievements literally don't matter. For example, I've seen so many people who would have a college degree from, for example, let's say Ukraine, had a good job, serious job. Some of them had businesses. Like, for example, in fact, my distant relative here currently lives in Chicago. The guy was working as an electronic engineer at one of the biggest factories or plants in the whole of Soviet Union. So they were building all kinds of electronics like TV sets and stuff like that. And he was a serious guy there. Then when that didn't work out eventually, when the Soviet Union collapsed, he had his own big business. He was installing traffic equipment, all those traffic lights and all that kind of stuff. So he was a big man in his town. He comes to Chicago, and unfortunately all that doesn't count. And so he pretty much had to settle for a job that just about anyone can do. And so unfortunately that's a big loss for him. And I'm not blaming anyone here, it's the reality. The same thing when an American goes, for example, let's say to Japan. In many cases, many of those knowledge that were much of that knowledge that was valuable in the United States all of a sudden becomes irrelevant in Japan. So the skills that you have to have there are different. The perceptions about what education is better is different, and all of a sudden you may have despite your prior achievements, you may have to start from zero, just like a high school graduate. Um, it is true too that often when you immigrate your status lowers, and again I guess going from America maybe to Japan, maybe to the Middle East, your status will be lower than that of locals. But then again, if you immigrate from Asia or immigrate from Africa or Latin America, almost certainly, especially if you go to Europe or North America or Australia, you will have to settle for a lower status. Here in Colombia, for example, the middle class or whatever you want to call them, most people, not most people, people who have jobs, like engineers or teachers or that stuff. Here they are, they would have some maids at home, they would have a house, maybe two, some of them have horses. They have a lot of recognition, a lot of status. Well, any of them immigrates to the United States, most of them basically go back to ground zero. All of a sudden, they're just, most people wouldn't even tell the difference between them and again, I'm going to use a specific stereotypes. Hopefully, it's not going to be offensive to anyone. But yes, as illegal, let's say Mexicans, and so unfortunately, they will have to settle for that. The same thing, by the way, with Mexicans. I mean, in Mexico, they may be a fairly respected family. You immigrate to the United States, most people wouldn't care. That's true. Most people wouldn't care, and this is wonderful because there are some countries where just about everyone would care. But there would be always a few jerks who would, perceive you as, oh, those, illegals. And so unfortunately that psychologically may be a loss. Job security, if something goes wrong at the company, those usually people are people who are first to go. You need to adjust in your environment, and that may be stressful, especially at an older age. And so there are many losses, and again, many of you probably would be also going sometime to a different country, who knows, and you would see a lot of that type of problems. Now, country of origin. So if you take, let's say a guy comes here from Guatemala. So what does Guatemala gain and what does Guatemala lose when a guy decides to immigrate from that country, let's say, to the United States? Well, there may be some positives. If the economy is bad and if there is unemployment that is high, a person who leaves is basically one less candidate for a job. So presumably unemployment as a percentage of people who don't have jobs of the total population, that may be lowered. So in tough economic times, immigration may not be so bad. Of course, it is true that usually those who immigrate, those are, the kind of, how should I put it, more qualified people, more entrepreneurial, more adventurous people, and it's kind of a question whether it's better for the country or not when they leave. But at least as far as reducing the demand for jobs, they seem to be doing some good there for the country. Now, when people come and live overseas, in most cases, that's because they have better job opportunities there, and as a result, they would be maybe sending some money back home, and so this way it would be almost like a little bailout package every time. So, and that's very important. In fact, studies show that much of that money, what is it called, reminiscence? So all those payments that go from immigrants back home, much of the Chinese economy was actually built based on that money. The same thing with Mexico, the same thing with other countries that have a large immigrant population overseas, or I guess diaspora population overseas. Plus, those people, even when they go to a different country, many may see that as as betrayal, but in a sense they become agents of those countries overseas. And so now when a Guatemalan company decides to do business in the United States, for example, all of a sudden there is a guy there who knows both cultures, languages, and so on, and maybe you're agent, maybe you're missing link. The same thing when you have Americans living overseas. For an American company, that's a huge asset. Now, again, that sounds a little, quirky here, but, if you believe that those who are true patriots should stay home and everybody else get out, well, immigration kind of takes care of that. So presumably those who are less patriotic are are more likely to immigrate. So, yeah. And plus, obviously, again, with the natural resource prices on the rise, the more people you lose, the more resources you have left by person, by individual, per individual in the country. So let's say you have 100 barrels of oil in your ground. Well, if there are 100 people, you have 1 barrel of oil per person. But if 50 of them immigrated, all of a sudden you have more resources to yourself. And so some people are obsessed with having a larger population. But generally, given the limited resources that we have, the more are out, the more we have left per person. Now, in terms of the negative effects on the country, well, obviously the biggest loss is brain drain. Again, those who immigrate usually are not your usual average citizens. Those tend to be more educated. In many cases, those are the ones who are more qualified to survive in a new society. And so that obviously leads to brain drain. Most of those people take their savings with them, resources, especially if we have immigrants who were, part of the government or the ruling class. Many of those people actually bring a lot of money with them, and so that's taking resources from the country that they leave. Some of them may take knowledge and often even secrets along. And then if the economy is booming, so there would be even fewer people left to support that growth. And then obviously it may lower the morale of those who stay. So if everyone's leaving the ship, it looks like the ship is sinking. And so unfortunately, for those psychologically, it may feel bad. Now, host company. So let's say a guy immigrates and takes a job here at Yum Yum or whatever company it is, VF. So what do they gain? Well, obviously, when you recruit an immigrant, you first of all presumably searched for talent not only in your country but also outside your country, or at least included people who otherwise wouldn't be in your country. And so hopefully that gives you a larger pool of applicants and gives you a better chance of selecting the best of the best for the job. Immigrants often take temp jobs, like for example, when you really need the people, you can hire them, especially if it's legal immigrants, it's easy to get rid of them. And so from that perspective, it may be a very good help for temporary projects. You get the project done, people came here for a specific project, they went, and it's no longer your responsibility once the project is over. And so that definitely helps, with the economy. In many cases, immigrants come here for money only. In fact, those especially who come here on a short period of time. And so since they are here specifically to earn some money in the short run, they work very hard. In many cases, care less about all kinds of things like social needs, and so they just work and work and work and work. And again, that's good for the society. Obviously, you want, if the person is here, then at least we want that person to work as much as possible and contribute as much as possible to the society. It is also true that immigrants usually have fewer rights, so it can be something as obvious as in some countries, like literally there may be some discrimination, but in many cases it may be something that many locals don't even notice, but it may be an issue. Like for example, most immigrants who work in the United States on so-called H-1B visa or O visa or TN status, so all those are visas or statuses, work permits for qualified, highly skilled employees. So those are not regular immigrants. Those are legal and highly skilled employees who had to prove their skills in order to get that visa. Well, the thing is, for example, that their family members are not allowed to work, so their wives would be basically sitting home, or maybe husbands, and not allowed to work, and so that's obviously, in a sense, discrimination, definitely an issue of rights. A big deal, by the way, so it is a big deal. May have fewer options, like for example, again, most immigrants here, legal, illegal, well, including legal, would have what we call an employer-specific visa. Again, all your H-1B, all TN, and whatever other visas are here, but again, those are professional visas, and thousands of them, hundreds of thousands actually, are issued every year. Now, all those people would be not allowed to earn any money outside their main employer. In fact, I have one of those, and so if I wanted to earn some money outside UNCG, I couldn't. And so some people may say, sure, you shouldn't, because you would be stealing jobs, but then imagine that there is some knowledge that I have that nobody else does. And I'd like to believe that at least something that I know based on my research nobody else does, because I mean, that's the nature of science, you know, you do something that nobody did before, because if it's been done, why would you want to research it again? And imagine there is a company here in Greensboro that can use my services. Maybe they need, I don't know, cross-cultural training for their employees, or maybe one of their employees goes overseas and so needs some kind of pre-departure cross-cultural training. I could do it technically. In fact, I'm fully qualified to do it. In fact, I did it a lot in Canada. Here in the United States, I'm just not allowed by my visa to earn money outside my school, so I can only do it pro bono, or you know, maybe for some support for my research, but not for money. And again, that definitely makes it a little harder for me. But so as a result, you know, that's an issue. But at the same time, because those people have fewer options outside the organization, they tend to be much more committed to the organization. So if you have one of those immigrant employees, it sounds kind of horrible, but if you're the owner of the company, the truth is that you can abuse them a little bit more, pay a little bit less, ask to work a little bit more. They have fewer options, and they're not gonna, you know, do much about it. So ethical and unethical, you be the judge, but economically for the organization, definitely good. Now, those people also bring new experiences, new connections in the foreign market as well, and that's an important thing, especially if you do some international business. So having people from other countries definitely is an asset for you. New connections. Immigrants are less likely to form a union, and again, if you are afraid of unions, as many company owners are, again, that's a good thing. And then often and again, good or bad, or you know, whatever you believe from the ethical perspective about that, but the reality is such that immigrants tend to get lower wages, right? And so since they earn lower wages, that's again a higher profit for the company. Again, we will talk later on what effect that has on the economy overall, but if you are a company owner, let's say you have your own business, whatever you do, construction business, well, if you hire immigrants, you can actually get all those little benefits, including higher profits. And then obviously brain drain. A guy comes here from, you know, let's say, you know, Einstein comes here and brings some ideas. This is actually good. I mean, you get all those best ideas, new experiences, new technologies. That's a very important thing. And so for a company, obviously, that would be also a big deal. But then again, immigrants tend to need more training, because especially in company-specific, culture-specific training, they may need more supervision and guidance. There may be some possible ethnic and cultural tension and misunderstanding. So not all people live happily together, as you know. Sometimes we portray that in books. I mean, there is certainly some tension, particularly, you know, and sometimes during, you know, tough times when the countries have political tension. Then immigrants from some countries may have a harder time adjusting, and again, that is potentially a problem for the company that employs them. And then again, those benefits may be temporary. So over time, those people may, you know, learn more, get new opportunities, demand more money, and so sometimes that might be, you know, a short-term effect for the company. Now, host country. So when immigrants come here to the United States, what does America as the whole win, and what does America as the whole lose? Well, as I said, the good thing is that they're ready to work right away. So raised and trained at someone else's expense. Wonderful thing. If the population is aging, like I talked about baby boomers, there was a huge spike in birth rate, and so there will be a very rapid shift toward aging population. And so the only way to keep standards of that aging population as high as they are now is to, pay them some form of, social security pension. And in order to do that, you have to basically raise more taxes, more revenues. But the only way to do it is to either tax those who work more or have more people, because the ratio of those who work and those who are retired is rapidly shifting in the United States now. And unlike in other countries, Canada and the United States haven't had the baby boomers in 60 years ago, now are going through some tough times. Now, immigrants also create jobs, and we'll actually have a separate slide on that, or a few slides in fact. But briefly, for example, 25% of immigrants are self-employed, and so they're not really taking anyone's job. They are creating jobs here, and many of them are business owners. But again, more on that later. There is more to be said about that. Now, this is extremely important. Very, very important. Don't forget it for the take-home assignment. So this is very, very important. What many people see is that immigrants come and take jobs. What many people don't see is that immigrants also create demand. So they don't not only offer their hands and brains, not only create a supply of labor, they also create demand for labor. Immigrants also need to be fed. They need a house. They need, I don't know, haircut, car, whatever else. And so when immigrants come here, they not only take jobs in a sense, right? They also create jobs, because whatever money they spend, and usually they tend to spend pretty much everything they earn, that's demand for other jobs. We'll talk more about that later on. Plus, again, even if they take jobs for less, that means that lower cost of production leads to less spending, more money left in the pockets. Lower prices obviously lead to more money left in your pocket, and the more money you have, by that I mean all consumers in the United States, the more money you have left in your pocket, the more money you can spend on something else that creates demand, and that leads to economic growth as well as job creation. So lowering prices, that's a very good thing. And then obviously, again, temporary workers are very beneficial. So all those like seasonal farmer workers who come here, for a month or so from, let's say, Mexico, help with the harvest and go back home. That's a big deal. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But that's a very important economic factor for the country. Often, especially when we talk about illegal immigrants, and we'll talk about them in more detail later on, but don't forget that illegal immigrants are not qualified for welfare, pension, medical care, all that stuff. And yes, I know you have this myth, or have heard that they reap the benefits, don't pay taxes, and reap all the benefits. I'll actually have some stats on that, so we'll talk about that later on. And then obviously, again, bring some knowledge, new technology. So brain drain, not for a specific company, but for the country in general. So as well as some maybe new resources. So those are all positives. Now negatives, and I'm not a lover of immigration. I'm just giving you both sides of the story, and I recognize very well that there are many negatives of immigration. So obviously, immigrants often need help settling down, social services, retraining. No question about that, and that's a problem. In fact, it may be also medical services, and we'll have a couple of separate slides on that. But again, regardless if the person is an immigrant, local, legal, illegal, if there is a life-threatening injury, a hospital would need to treat at least the person as far as making sure that the person doesn't die. It is also true that immigrants are not only poorer, but poverty breeds crime. And unfortunately, it is true that parts of the cities where immigrants tend to live, or poor people generally, many of whom are immigrants, tend to live, those parts of the city are not the nicest parts of the city. I mean, it is true that there will be some crime there. There will be other kinds of problems that arise from poverty, and I recognize that very well, no question about that. There may be some ethnic and social tension in the society, and in the United States, luckily, it's not really a huge deal, but in some European countries it is. Like, for example, people from Muslim countries, like in the in the UK or France, there is a big deal and controversy about that, and so riots, conflicts, even bombing. So there are all kinds of problems there, and so I do recognize that problem. They often create strains on services. In the United States, it is a concern. Many people are worried that immigrants uh, get more from the society than they contribute, and we'll talk more about stats on that. But the more poor people you have, the more you have to provide in form of social services, medical services, and stuff like that. And especially in countries like northern, for example, Europe, like Norway, Sweden, those countries took many immigrants, refugees of war from North Africa. Now, many of those people, unfortunately, due to lack of knowledge, skills, and stuff like that, may not be working. But at the same time, in those countries, social benefits are very lavish, I would even say. And in fact, you don't really have to work in order to have what many would call a comfortable life. And so there is a whole class of people who are not really, doing much there, and that's definitely a strain on services. Permanent immigrants, again, if a social welfare system is generous, that's definitely potentially a problem. If a critical mass is reached, they may become the major political force, and many people may not like that very much. Like, for example, many Americans are concerned that Mexicans constitute now a huge, in fact, the majority in some states and some counties. And so again, at least theoretically, that may be a good thing, but at the same time, many see that as a bad thing because the culture is changing and everything else, and potentially that's again tension. That's a problem. It is true, potentially increased unemployment. If there is no economic growth and more people are coming, then obviously somebody's going to be without jobs, and so immigrants or locals, somebody's going to lose, and the country as a whole may experience problems. And then obviously again, more people for the same natural resources. I mean, the more people come here, the less land you have per person, the less natural resources you have per person. Here's a question. Let's see if you can answer it. And the correct answer is D. There is your hint. On the exam, if you see a question that contains always or never, know that it's the wrong answer. It's not always, it's never always, and never never. So the correct answer is usually works well or predominantly a positive effect, but maybe negative for this or vice versa. But it's never like in these cases. It's always beneficial. No, not always. There are some negatives all the time, or there are some positives all the time. So keep that in mind. Now, let's get into some specific issues. Let's talk about some specific concerns that people have about immigration, look at some data, and do some analysis here. First, taxes. The biggest concern, obviously no question about that, is that immigrants don't pay taxes but reap all the benefits. So let's talk about taxes. What taxes do people pay? There are several major groups of taxes. Bear with me here, because this is the most misunderstood statement and concern. If you think about that, you will never look at immigration the same way. So I know that at this time, most of you, I'm not sure if you personally, but I know most of you are concerned that immigrants don't pay taxes but reap the benefits. But bear with me, let's analyze the issue. There are four major types of taxes: income tax, property tax, vehicle registration tax, sales tax. There is also corporate tax. Now, if you think about that, there is no way an immigrant, legal, illegal, doesn't matter, can escape most of those taxes. For example, sales tax. You come into a store, you buy something, and the sales tax is automatically charged. So it doesn't matter, you always pay that tax. 7.8% in the in North Carolina, boom, there. Nobody asks for your immigration papers, everybody pays. Vehicle registration, again, I don't see how you can escape paying that one. You can probably drive without a license plate, but obviously 99.99% of the cars do have that, and you pay vehicle registration. Property tax, nobody cares who owns the house. The taxes are assessed, and they are paid regardless of who lives in the house, right? Or else. So this is not something you can hide. Income tax, this one's tricky. On the one hand, you would think that immigrants, legal immigrants, can or not paying those taxes. The truth is, how do you pay income taxes? Can you tell me, like, you've had jobs, right? How do you pay that tax? Think about that. How do you pay your income tax? Tell me. The truth is, that you don't pay income tax. The company that pays you pays your income tax for you. Like for me, it's not like I write a check every month and send it to the IRS. Every time I receive my paycheck, my income tax is deducted there. So a huge majority of immigrants who work here, legally or illegally, doesn't matter, every time they receive a paycheck, they would often make up social security numbers, they would often fake all kinds of things, but it's not because they want to avoid paying taxes, that's because they want to get the pay minus the income tax. So how do you turn, I mean, the only way to avoid paying income tax is if somebody pays you cash and you just put it in your pocket and the money never goes through the books. And yes, part of the payments go like that, you know, like somebody mows your lawn. I'm not sure how you do it, but I suspect some of you probably just pay, you know, $40 or whatever the deal. And so, and then yes, in that case taxes are not paid. But the vast majority of illegal immigrants actually work kind of officially. So they are hired, they make up sometimes the social security number, sometimes, you know, other types of things, and they would actually or have some form of an temporary social security number like ITIN, and so they would actually be, or whoever pays them would take and pay the income tax for them. It just you know, so there is really not an easy way to escape that. Then on top of that, again, corporate taxes. Well, if a corporation employs illegal immigrants or legal immigrants, doesn't matter in this case, the corporation still pays taxes on its income. And if the company could save something by maybe hiring cheaper immigrants, that means that the company will make more profit. That means that the company will pay higher taxes. And again, an immigrant can't really escape or make company not pay that tax. So unfortunately or not unfortunately, those taxes are paid. Plus, as I said, every time an immigrant shops at Walmart, Walmart earns some money because the revenue increases of Walmart, and Walmart pays a higher tax. And so indirectly, immigrants also contribute to corporations paying higher taxes. So the only tax really that immigrants, including illegal immigrants, can escape is the income tax that is on the amounts of money that are earned that have been basically has been paid in cash. And again, statistics shows that most illegal, including illegal immigrants, don't really work for cash. So they would have jobs like, for example, Walmart has been notorious for employing illegal immigrants. Well, again, they would be actually not paying cash. It's not like the shift manager at the end of the day gives each of those people $50 cash. No, they would be actually in the system. And so again, those immigrants have no way of avoiding paying those taxes. So a fairly small, in fact almost negligible percentage of all possible taxes is not paid by immigrants, including illegal immigrants. And then obviously legal immigrants like myself, I mean, I obviously pay all my taxes. In fact, my only source of income is my salary, and so there is absolutely no way I can avoid any taxes. Sales tax, obviously I pay that. Vehicle registration, no way I can escape that. Property, my house, obviously that's assessed. Income, I can't even, you know, choose how much I pay. So the company, the university pays that for me, and I get my check with all those taxes already deducted. So there is no way we can escape those taxes. So that's very important to keep in mind. Now, here are a couple of articles that you may read. Some of them you have links here, and some of them actually place the whole text articles into the Dropbox. I mean, not the Dropbox, the Blackboard. The reality is such, according to those studies, and I mean, those are people who researched it seriously. I mean, it's not you and I who just know something about it. That's actually serious research. It actually shows that the reality is such that most immigrants, even those who are illegally here, choose to pay their income tax, even including that they earned in cash. Many of them hope that there will be some kind of path to citizenship, plus they can legally apply for so-called ITIN numbers, immigrant temporary identification number. And so stats shows that illegal immigrants, for example, pay roughly $7 billion per year in the United States into Social Security funds. And that's a huge amount of money. Again, the truth is that much of that money comes from immigrants who make up bogus SSN numbers, Social Security numbers, and so the only reason they pay that because they want to get the job, and so the only reason the money is there because they need to pay that in order to be on the payroll. But again, many actually consciously come and pay that amount of money. And so again, I kind of have a hard time believing that. I mean, once you have that cash in your pocket, would you really go and pay and especially declare that you're here illegally? But research shows that many actually do. And so the truth is that immigrants actually do pay taxes, in fact most of it. And so it is also true that most studies show, and I have links here, that immigrants tend to contribute much more in taxes to the system than what they take in form of, free healthcare, which again, whoever tells you that there is free healthcare in the United States basically is lying to you. I mean, healthcare in the United States has never been free, except for, some super emergency cases when a guy gets injured and gets into a hospital. But in most cases, immigrants, I mean, it's really, if it's really life-threatening, they would be risking going to hospital and being, caught there because of, lack of immigrant documents. In most cases, they prefer to stay low and not to go to a hospital. So taxes, read those articles if you don't believe me. You have there New York Times. You have there all kinds of articles, governmental research. It's actually not as much of a problem not paying taxes as sometimes politicians are trying to present to you to get your vote. Now, here is an article from, again, MSNBC about paying taxes. And frankly, I kind of find this one, how should I put it, not very believable. This article here talks about that at tax time, illegal immigrants are paying too. No one disputes money is coming in, just how much, it's not quite clear. And so this article basically tells that almost all, or a huge majority of illegal immigrants actually choose to pay their taxes, pay at the end of the year, write a check. And I don't know, I've never really met anyone who's an illegal immigrant. I mean, I've always lived in other countries legally, and most of my friends are either locals or other legal immigrants. So I don't really know that illegal immigrant world. But if this article is true, and I frankly say I have a hard time to believe that, but at the same time these guys did some research, so I mean they definitely know more about that, then it actually is the case that illegal immigrants pay in most cases and huge amounts of money. So look at the numbers, and if you don't believe that article, do some more research. It's easy to find more studies. So but yes, it seems like it's coming from a very credible source. Now, in terms of taxes, let's talk about benefits reaped. So the kind of the concern is that not paying taxes but reaping all the benefits. Well, we've established that taxes are paid, most of it, and even income tax in most cases is paid. Now, what do immigrants get back? Oh, and by the way, extremely important, think about how much in taxes would an illegal immigrant have to pay if the illegal immigrant chose to pay the tax. It is true that most of them actually don't make much money. I mean, it is true that many of them work for, a minimum wage, or, if it's cash, it can be even less than that. But even let's assume that an immigrant makes $100 a day. I mean, I don't think many of them actually make that much, but let's assume. That's a fairly small income anyway, right? And so you work 20 days a week maybe, so that comes up to about $20,000 a year. Well, at that level of income, your income tax would actually be fairly small, and in fact there is a very good chance after the tax refund at the end of the year, once you qualify for all those refunds, kids, and whatever else you spend your money on, there is a very good chance they wouldn't be paying much or any taxes at all. I'm a fairly rich, well, I guess no, I pay actually much more than I get in the tax refund, but I remember as a student I was not paying much taxes, my income was fairly small, and then I would get a couple of thousand refund at the end of the year. So in that low tax bracket, as long as you're making below $25,000, you wouldn't be paying much taxes anyway. So it's not like they are withholding $500,000 every year, so it's a big deal. But now again, still some don't pay, and even if it's one penny not paid, it is already a problem. Like even one single penny not paid, why? I mean, I pay all my taxes, you pay all my taxes, I mean, not my, all your taxes. So why should anybody get a free ride? Why should anybody not pay? So again, I'm not trying to portray that as, oh, no problem at all. There is a problem, no question about that. The thing is that the problem is much smaller if you look at the actual numbers than what many people, especially again politicians who are trying to score some cheap political dividends, much less than what those people try to tell you, and definitely much less than what people on the street usually think, those who never studied the topic. Now let's talk about benefits reaped. This is a very important thing, right? So, well, obviously schooling for kids is free. So when you have kids, you go to school, nobody is going to deny their right to go to school, even if they are here illegally. And again, don't forget, and this is extremely important, don't forget that most immigrants in the United States are actually legal. Like myself, I have a work permit, and so I pay my taxes. Most people are like that. So, but then even those who are here illegally, their kids come to school, and so schools are paid from my taxes, your taxes, and obviously that's a kind of that's what they take from society. Sometimes there may be some retraining for adults, illegal, especially immigrants, and so that costs money. Settlement services, shelters, so that may be potentially a large amount of money. But if you look at the total cost of educating illegals, immigrants, children in schools in the United States, that's usually around 1% of the total school's operating budget. So even if, let's say, all those kids disappeared one day, aliens kidnapped that, the school's budgets would not really be noticeably different. It's not like half of all the money that you spend on schools goes on children of illegal immigrants who don't pay taxes. The truth is that in most cases that would be a negligible amount of money. On top of that, and don't forget about that, schools as well as other like roads, safety, public services are usually paid from state taxes, and so there may be a state income tax, but much of that would actually be a sales tax. Well, I guess for schools not really, so I'll get to that in a minute. Now, also many of those people also would be qualified for social and welfare benefits, and again, especially those who are here illegally, and that's a burden for the budget, and I put that in red. Immigrants use roads, legal, illegal immigrants, everybody use roads, enjoy safety here, public services and all that. And so again, somebody has to pay for that, and so immigrants enjoy that equally as we are. Well, I'm an immigrant, so I guess we all enjoy that equally. Now, healthcare. This one's strange. There is this belief that immigrants come and enjoy healthcare for free, and because of that, it costs more to everyone. Well, I've seen some studies, and in fact, I believe I have one of those studies in the optional readings. Look at the numbers there. The study shows that unpaid emergency care bills constitute from 0.5% to 2% of total hospital operating cost. So a hospital has to spend a lot of money to operate, and doctor's salary, maintenance of the buildings, all that kind of stuff, right? Of all that amount that the hospital spent, payroll of doctors and everything else, only about 0.5% to 2% of the of the amount is due to unpaid emergency care bills. So somebody walks into the hospital, it is true that the person has to be taken care of, at least as far as before the person is in stable condition, but it's not such a huge amount of money. I mean, it's a small percentage of total operating cost. So if, let's say, tomorrow something happened and everybody started paying medical bills, it's not like it's going to make a huge revolution. So what? Hospitals will have an extra 0.5% in their budget. And yes, even if it's 10 cents, it would be already good. But it's not going to make hospitals substantially richer, or medical care substantially better, or your medical insurance bill is substantially lower. I mean, at the very best, it will reduce the cost by, let's say, on average 1.5%. I mean, you probably wouldn't even notice that on your monthly premiums. Now, and this is very important, unpaid medical bills, that's all unpaid medical bills. The vast majority of unpaid medical bills are actually those that are not paid by American citizens. So immigrants, yes, legal, illegal would be treated, but that's a very small portion of people without health insurance who come into hospitals. Locals too, sometimes, in fact, huge millions of Americans don't have health insurance, and they also get injured. And if they are injured, they would go to a hospital. And so that 0.5% to 2% of unpaid emergency care bills as the percentage of hospitals' operating cost. That's of all people. What percentage of those are immigrants? I don't have the number, unfortunately, on that, but I'm guessing that's a minority. I mean, there are many more Americans here without medical insurance than there are immigrants here without medical insurance. So, figures are that dozens and dozens of Americans don't have medical insurance. What percentage of those are illegal immigrants without insurance, or immigrants in general? So, if you look at the percentage of total hospitals' operating cost in terms of unpaid medical care bills, let's say on average that's 1.5%. Even if half of those were immigrants, the number reduces, right, cuts in half, but something's telling me it's even smaller than that. So it would be a fairly small number. Now, if you look at that as the total percent of GDP, not GDP, total percent of healthcare cost in the United States, You look at those numbers, you look at and here I have numbers from a paper that is attached to your optional readings there, so read that paper. If you look at those numbers total, then you will see that the unpaid bills as the percent of healthcare cost is only 0.06%. Now, I don't know what portion of that is due to immigrants, but probably no more than half and maybe less than that. Which means if tomorrow something happened and all your healthcare, cost became, everybody started paying bills, or immigrants disappeared and nobody of that group was not paying bills, the overall cost of healthcare wouldn't even change noticeably. I mean, it's not going to make any difference. It's not like, you all of a sudden your healthcare premiums will drop by a substantial amount of money. You probably wouldn't even notice that. And so whoever tells you that the expensive healthcare in the United States is due to all those, immigrants who are not paying their bills and going to hospital, just completely unsubstantiated. That's definitely not going to solve any problem, and frankly, it's not really creating any substantial problems. Again, to be true, even if 2 cents are not paid, this is bad. No question about that. I already see that as a problem and something needs to be done about that. But at the same time, those who tell you that this is the cause of the problem with the healthcare system, or by solving that problem you will solve the problems of the healthcare system in the United States, complete not true, right? So definitely not true, and so that's not the cause, and that's definitely not a solution, though it is a problem that needs to be taken care of, including, along with other problems. Yes, and as I said, illegal immigrants, even if they don't pay a dollar or a cent, that is a problem. But again, those who believe that they are the cause of the problems in whatever sector, healthcare or something else, those are just lying to you. I mean, that's not a source of the problem. And then again, if you magically could solve the problem tomorrow, it's not going to solve any deficiencies of the medical healthcare system in the United States. That's unfortunate, and so those who fight and think that that's going to be your magic pill, no, it's not. Anyway, here is your question. Question number 3. Which of the following taxes are usually not paid by illegal immigrants? And obviously the answer is income tax. And many studies show that actually even those are usually paid. But compared to others, that's the only one that you can really avoid paying, and so that would be the correct answer. Now, one of the problems of the debate on immigration is that we focus so much on negatives that we often forget about what needs to be done right. The truth is that American immigration system is fairly tough, meaning that it's very difficult to become an American citizen. And on the one hand, I understand why. On the other hand, we live in a highly competitive age. And immigrants, highly qualified particularly, are very important for the society. And there is, at the same time when there is this war against immigration, there is also a war for talent, global war for talent. And countries, developed countries like Australia, Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, compete for those brains. I mean, no question that the future, several decades, maybe centuries, will be all about technology and development. And countries that can attract the best of the best will be in an advantaged situation. The thing is that hardly anyone talks in the United States, unfortunately, about what needs to be done to attract the right candidates, the right immigrants. Much of the discussion is about what do you do to repel the wrong immigrants. So much of the debate is basically about, are we going to build a fence between Mexico and the United States or not? What do you do to limit illegal immigration from Latin America? And that's an important topic, no question about that. What we also should be talking about, and maybe even more than what needs to be done about the negatives of immigration, but what should be discussed is what can we do to reap the benefits of immigration? What do we do to attract those best of the best on this planet so that they help build this country? And so let's talk about, what should be done, who should be attracted. The truth is, as I said, Australia, Canada, they have this point system where as long as you have unique skills, and lots of them, you have pretty much a green path, free path to that country, those countries. Immigrating to those countries is fairly easy, so if you qualify. If you don't, there is no way you can get in. In fact, it's much tougher than in the United States. But if you are highly qualified, if you have advanced knowledge, advanced degrees, if you have other types of skills, if you're of the right age, so not too old, not too close to retirement, it's very easy to go to those countries. The United States is much tougher to get in, and guess what? Many qualified people from all around the world probably wouldn't mind coming to the United States. Who knows? Maybe some of them actually prefer to go to Canada, but many probably wouldn't mind going to the United States. But when they look at all, basically how easy it is to get in one versus the other, in many cases they just end up saying, you know what, I'm going to Canada, I'm going to Australia, I'm going to whatever country they go to, because it's so much easier to go there. So why should I be waiting for the rest of my life for the citizenship in the United States, or maybe not even ever get the green card, whereas I can fairly easily get in all those other countries. Now Germany, the United Kingdom, they are becoming major players in the war for global talent, in the global war for talent. They also make it easier and easier for people who are highly qualified to come to those countries. And so if America doesn't look at what needs to be done to attract the best of the best, America may actually no longer be the winner of that war for brains. And so that's very important. So now, who should be coming here? Well, there are several things that you should look at. One, you obviously want people with those who are likely to adapt in the host country. So those who are likely become productive members of the society, for example, in the United States in our case, or whatever country you're talking about. And so I'm very surprised that Canadian and Australian immigration systems are not ever mentioned in the debate on immigration in the United States. Like last presidential campaign, Obama versus McCain, lots of talks about immigration. I had not once heard the word Canada. The thing is that those countries built a very effective immigration system. They have this point system where, based on studies and empirical evidence, they have categories or predictors of success of an immigrant, and so they give you points for obviously education, and even more points for education in an English language country like Canada itself or the United States. They give you points for work experience, for profession, and those, by the way, change every year, so depending on what professions are needed at this given time. For age, the younger the better, because the older you are, the closer you are to retirement. They even give you points, obviously, for language, language skills, and so on and so on and so on. And so all of those have been shown to have a positive effect on immigrants' productivity or adaptability. And as long as you get the needed points, it's easy to get in. In fact, it's pretty much guaranteed to get in, provided you don't have any problems with the law and stuff like that. At the same time, if you don't get those points, nothing's going to help you. You can even have family and stuff. Well, family just give you some points. So if you don't have anything else, only family in Canada, no luck. You don't have enough points. You definitely got to have more. In the United States, the system is not bad at all, but it's mainly geared towards family and connections, and so unfortunately many people can actually come here who don't have that adaptability trait. In the United States, though, you have a whole program of H-1B visas, so those are professional visas, and so that's not quite the same as points, but those who get those visas can apply for the permanent residency here and then citizenship. And so those are the people who are highly qualified, so in a sense that's similar to what Canada has, but it's a small percentage of immigrants who come here. So most other people never have to pass this adaptability test, and it's kind of too bad that they don't, because again, as I said, immigration overall, well, it's not really that it's good or bad. It's just there are some immigrants who are good, and there are some who are bad. And so the problem, if you don't look at how you attract the best and how you repel the worst, well, then you get everything. But if you become more selective and look at those things, you get the best and you don't get the worst. And so adaptability is one of those selection criteria. Capital is another good thing. You probably want immigrants with lots of money. An immigrant who comes here with the bag of cash is basically your walk-in bailout package. That's like a reverse of the trade deficit reduction. So it's almost like a guy could be in China buying your products, or he can come here to the United States and buy your products. The best immigrants are tourists, and yes, tourists are not really immigrants per se. I mean, they're not here permanently, but strictly speaking, it's not really that different. A person comes here, and it's with whatever you want to label that person. The tourist is a good person is because tourists are allowed to spend money but not allowed to earn money, and so they come and spend money, so that's stimulus for the economy. Another, by the way, interesting example of people who bring capital and don't take any cash is students. Those guys are allowed to pay tuition, pay for their home, car, and stuff like that, but not allowed to work. And so in many cases, that's a lot of money that they bring. The best immigrants, actually, my heart breaks when I say that. I mean, it's against my values in many respects, but economically, I should say that yes, it is kind of true. Anyone knows who this guy is? That's the former Prime Minister of Ukraine. The guy stole a lot of money from me personally because I was paying taxes in the 90s when he was the Prime Minister. So anyway, the guy steals a lot of money and then is arrested in the United States on the charges of money laundering. Brings a huge amount of money, roughly $500 million, bought a huge mansion in Miami, created a number of jobs, from reconstruction, remodeling of that mansion all the way to, well, obviously he was here on home arrest first, and now he's in prison. Actually, will be released later this year after like 10 years in prison. So, but the guy, lawyers, house maintenance, food, all that stuff. I mean, he spends the money. He has millions of dollars, and I believe some of that money was confiscated, but millions have been left in his accounts. On top of that, he had a baby with his interpreter, and again, medical bills and stuff like that. All that was paid. So these guys, he's not going to work a day in his life anymore. So he is basically just spending the money. And so, I mean, I hate the guy genuinely, and not really I hate, I just recognize that he's basically bad. And I wouldn't recommend anyone to have citizens like that. But from the economic perspective, that's the best immigrant. He brought huge amounts of money, and he's not going to take anybody's job, but he's going to spend like crazy. And so, in a sense, that's a good thing for the economy. Now, what kind of immigrants we don't want? Well, we don't want substitution. Yes, it is true that immigrants sometimes steal is a strong word, but take jobs that could have been otherwise taken for the locals. And those immigrants are usually immigrants who have substitute skills. So you have a guy here who can work on an assembly line at a GM factory. An immigrant comes with the same skills, and so there is a good chance that local guy may lose the job. So we don't want to have here immigrants who have skills that are already overrepresented in your country, particularly now when much of the manufacturing is shrinking. You probably don't want to have immigrants who can do those kinds of jobs and nothing else, because those are your walk-in substitutes for the locals, and so that's probably what you don't really want. Effects of substitution have been studied extensively. I've seen many studies, like by many I mean dozens and dozens, that looked at effects of immigration on unemployment. And so some of those studies would, for example, compare unemployment in high immigrant population areas versus low immigrant population areas over time, all kinds of research design. And they show that it is true that immigration may take some jobs, or steal some jobs. So immigrants may substitute jobs of locals, but only in low skill areas. Meaning that if a job is no skill, no language required, then yes, it is true that immigrants with no skills can displace locals. The effect is zero pretty much in jobs that require some type of training, some type of skills. Usually immigrants, even though some of them compete with the locals, but then again they create more jobs by creating demand for food and everything else, and so the effect tends to be zero and pretty much non-existent. But yes, for lower skilled jobs, substitution may be a problem, and if that is the case, then try to filter out immigrants who may be substitutes for the locals. Now, going back to what immigrants we want. Well, we want immigrants that bring new directions into the economy, new directions in business, new direction in arts, science, sports. In other words, those are the people who are not stealing anybody's job. They bring something that didn't exist before. Like, for example, this guy, you know who this guy is? Yes, that's Einstein. Well, he brought lots of new ideas into this country, and what he was doing at that time, nobody else was doing. And so it's not like he came and there was a professor here who did that and that professor was left without a job. No, he brought something entirely new, and so he didn't take anybody's job. He just created a completely new direction of research. The guy here in the yellow pants, that's the guy who brought Taekwondo to the United States. And again, there was no Taekwondo in the United States at that time. So he brought something completely new, created new schools. Thanks to him, many Americans became healthier, learned something, maybe learned some discipline and stuff like that. And so it's very important that, again, that didn't exist. It's not like he displaced someone. It's just a completely new direction. And so those immigrants obviously are good. So somebody with unique skills in, as I said, businesses, arts, sciences, sports, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you want to attract those people. Now, here is a question for you. And the correct answer is B, C, and D. So E is the correct answer. Substitution would be associated with job losses, all the other ones with job creation. Now, talking about new directions and complementarity. Did I miss a slide? Oh, yeah, I missed a slide. What immigrants do you want? You want also immigrants that complement locals, create the whole picture. We humans cooperate, and through cooperation we can achieve more. Cooperation is the foundation of our human achievement. Division of labor was one of our greatest inventions. Once we learned how to divide labor and become specialized, I teach, you build cars, you build houses, you do engineering, you do lawyering, and so on and so on. Is there such a word like lawyering? Whatever lawyers do, right? So by specializing, by dividing labor, we become better at what we do, and productivity dramatically improves. Now, complementation is the root of labor division. We complement each other. I know something, you know something, I focus on what I know, you focus on what you know, and we all become better off as a result. And so in the context of immigration, we should select immigrants that would complement those skills of locals. I'll give you a few examples. High American, low immigrant complementation. Let's say, let's talk about lawyers. How much do lawyers make per hour when they do lawyering, like represent the clients in court, for example? A lot of money. How much do lawyers make when they make copies or write memos? Probably not so much. A lawyer or a contractor or whoever else can make much more money and make a much greater contribution to the society when that person focuses on high skill things, that jobs or tasks that he or she and only she can do. By hiring an immigrant who has a complementing skills, like for example, I'm a lawyer, I do lawyering, I hire an immigrant who makes copies for me. I as a lawyer can focus on a more productive thing, so opportunity cost all of a sudden becomes an issue. And so by getting that type of support, I can focus on a more important type of job, and so I will make more money, I will produce more for the society, so that complementation, that aid that I may get from an immigrant may be helpful. The other way around, low American, high immigrant complementation. Well, again, Americans don't always have to be higher socially or organizationally or on the organizational hierarchy. If a guy comes here, for example, with some kind of skills, or perhaps brings some business ideas and capital and starts a company, the guy may use some help from Americans. Maybe again, some of them will have some, I don't know, like a driver for him, or maybe somebody will be cleaning the rooms, or maybe somebody will be doing engineering while the guy will be doing administrative job. So by complementing those higher skills and lower skills, again, everybody would be better off. That American driver potentially earns more money and does something productive for the society, and the other guy can focus on something more important. And then lateral complementation. Again, if someone comes and brings new technology and then hires some American engineers to help develop that technology, that's a lateral complementation. Both of them are at the same level, but you know how to build a house, I know how to paint a house, and together we make everyone better off. And so all that definitely helps create new jobs, because by working separately, our productivity would shrink, would drop. And so by complementing each other, we can actually create more, produce more in a given period of time, earn more, and do more for the society. So yes, and we got that question before. Now, complementarity in new directions, extreme examples. Did you know, for example, that the population in the Silicon Valley, that the America's high-tech hub and IT hub, is comprised of a disproportionately high number of immigrants, in particularly those of Chinese, Indian, and Eastern European descent. So it's not that all of the Silicon Valley are immigrants, But here we have pictures of the companies in the Silicon Valley that have some immigrant intake input. Some of them are completely founded by immigrants. Some of them have a substantial portion of their capital or ideas brought by immigrants. Those companies all have something to do with immigration, and in many cases, if immigrants were not there, the company would never exist. Like for example, Google. Take for instance Google. Not even on this list for some reason. Might be an outdated list. Well, Sergey Brin is an immigrant. He was kind of bad example because he was only like 5 or 8 when he came here. But again, had he not, would we have the same Google? I don't know, but probably not. At least not, definitely not exactly the same. Many of those people were invited or came here because of their knowledge and skills, so they came here on H-1B visa or O visa, and again, some immigrated as family, children, something like that. But again, many of those people made significant contributions to the country. Now, there is also this synergetic effect. The reason the Silicon Valley has been so successful because you have a whole bunch of people there with all kinds of ideas all working in the same direction. And somebody says something that gives me an idea, and then I do something that otherwise I wouldn't do. I say something that gives an idea to somebody else, so there is this synergy. So when we work together, 2 plus 2 sometimes maybe more than 4. And so studies showing again and again, like for example, when you have brainstorming sessions, when you have more people, you actually can come up not only with more ideas in general, but you come up with more ideas per person and better ideas. Because again, everyone feeds off each other, and so together they can actually do much better and much more than they would have otherwise. Now, very important when you talk about immigration, especially on the take-home assignment, make sure to remember to talk about supply, demand, and price in jobs. And I talked briefly about that, but I would like to say it one more time. Immigrants are not only providers of labor, not only offer their hands and brains, not only take jobs, in other words, but also they're consumers, and they also create jobs. So they have to eat, they have to have a place to live in, they have to have a car, all that stuff, and that's all demand that creates jobs. The question is, do they take more jobs or do they create more jobs? And so this is a little tricky. Obviously there are some jobs that would have not existed here because if there were no immigrants, like all those ethnic food stores, I mean they're here predominantly to cater to that population, so those jobs wouldn't even exist in the first place. But again, that's an extreme example. Let's talk about something more specific. Like for example, let's talk about immigrants who provide no supply of labor, but so they take no jobs, don't lower wages, but they create demand for jobs, so they pay for products. Who would be those immigrants? Well, there are several categories. Tourists, obviously. Tourists only pay but don't work. Their visas would not allow work, and most tourists, precisely why they come for tourism, not for work. International students, that's a wonderful example. I mean, those guys can pay tuition, they can pay their rent, they can pay for gas, for food, but they are not allowed to work, and so they only provide demand for jobs but never offer any labor. Millionaires, those guys just don't have to work, and so those guys again create demand but not supply labor. And so those are very good immigrants. They definitely create more demand for labor than they supply labor. In fact, they supply zero labor. Now, immigrants that offer labor but create no demand, have no money and pay for no services and no goods, well, that's tricky. Maybe refugees, in many cases they would not be allowed to, well, not, they may be so poor that they would not be spending anything. It's hard to imagine how they would not be spending anything, but again, they would probably try to work as much as they can and at the same time spend as less as they earn. But at the same time, most immigrants are somewhere in between. I mean, we all, like for example, I earn something, so I take a job, but then at the same time I spend a lot of money, and so I have a car, I have a gym membership and all that stuff. So obviously I create lots of jobs as well through my spendings, and since I spent most of my salary including mortgage of my house and stuff like that, I'd say that I probably create as much as I take. Immigrants that increased wages by, for example, creating new businesses. Well, entrepreneurial immigrants can substantially increase wages by creating new directions. So like for example, Sergey Brin of Google, I mean that guy is an entrepreneur, and so they definitely make our job easier because of all those wonderful Google products. And if it was not for Google, I wouldn't be able to be as productive as I am, and many people wouldn't be as productive as they are. And by helping us be more productive, they increase our wages, so I can do more in a given period of time, and so I can earn more. And so there are many businesses that benefit and greatly improve their productivity because of entrepreneurial immigrants like this guy. And so obviously that all helps us make more money in the same period of time. Skilled immigrants, those who bring know-hows. Again, there is a huge population in the United States of guys who work in technology and science, and presumably those create new knowledge that help us become more productive, build better cars, better machines, better team building training, and so those guys can help us be more productive and thereby increase our earnings, our wages. And maybe inspiring immigrants like Arnie, for example, here, right? So he immigrated here from Austria, and who knows, maybe because of his achievements, some people woke up earlier, worked a little harder, and as a result became wealthier, increased their wages. So all those can be potential factors that increase wages of the locals. Now, this is very important. You actually have the whole article in the optional readings. When we say the word immigrant in the United States, most people all of a sudden think, not all of a sudden, think instantly a guy from Mexico. The truth is that that's not the only type of immigrants, and we'll talk about those separately, but even those may be highly beneficial. But the thing is that that's not the only type of immigrant. There are many immigrants who are highly skilled and come here for jobs that otherwise wouldn't be filled because they have the skills and maybe locals don't. There is this so-called, as I said, H-1B visa. So that's the visa that is given to people who are highly skilled and highly qualified to do jobs on a temporary basis. The limit on those visas has been set in 1987 if I remember correctly. And at that time it was determined that 144,000 of those visas would be issued every year. Now, all those are employer specific, and employers have to apply on behalf of their employees to get that visa. The thing is that in the last 20 years or so, much has changed, and the need for highly qualified people has increased dramatically. And at the same time, because it's such a political issue, the cap on the number of H-1B visas has not been increased. And so while many people fight against illegal immigration, pass all those laws like what Nevada or Arizona passed, or New Mexico passed, or Oklahoma, corporations, many of them, innovators like Apple, like Google, like Microsoft, those icons of American prosperity, they fight for immigration, particularly for increasing the cap for the H-1B visa. The need for those kinds of highly skilled employees is increasing rapidly, and unfortunately it cannot be satisfied internally. It's not like there are many college educated unemployed engineers in the United States. There are probably some, but definitely not enough. And so those other immigrants are extremely important for the United States, but at the same time the quotas are very low, and it hurts local companies. In fact, what it leads to is that many of those companies have to outsource the jobs, and rather than bringing the Chinese guy here to do the job, they would hire him in Shanghai. And that means that the salary would be still paid, but the money would be spent in China, not in the United States. So the money is spent the same way, but instead of creating demand for housing, demand for cars, for services here, the guy would actually live in China and create demand there. So create jobs in China rather than in the United States. And so in a case when a job goes unfilled, which happens with thousands and thousands of jobs every year, essentially, limiting those kinds of visas leads to promoting job outsourcing. Many more jobs would be created in the United States if the companies could bring their overseas employees here. And again, those would be gainfully employed, highly productive employees that would spend their money here, thereby creating demand for other jobs. But, c'est la vie. So read that article, very interesting stuff. How is the United States faring in the war for global talent? Well, as I said, unfortunately not so well. The number of H-1B visas that attract talent has been capped in 1987 and hasn't changed since then, whereas other countries notably, again, as I said, Australia, Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom, Middle East, the BRIC countries like Brazil, Russia, including, for example, Colombia, even here, and obviously China and India. Those countries do a very good job attracting the best of the best. So there are more and more Indians and Chinese going to their home countries. I meet lots of Colombians here who got American education and chose to come here for opportunities. At the school where I currently am here teach, there are several German guys, there are several American guys who teach, and they came here because the salary is not much lower than that in the United States, but the quality of life that you can buy with that salary is much higher. And so coming here for them is no problem. Like Germans coming here, but sometimes going to the United States it may be a big deal, a big problem. Like for example, I'm a Canadian citizen, and even I have a huge problem getting American citizenship. It's not so easy, and so holding everything else constant, many of them say, you know what, I'm going to the Middle East, I'm going and taking a job in Saudi Arabia, in Germany, in Australia, in Canada, in Colombia, for Christ's sake, and that's definitely not a benefit for the United States. So those people, their talent should be actually fought for and not repelled, as unfortunately sometimes done. Well, anyway, you got the idea. Now, we are concerned about immigrants who are low skill, low talent, but how about highly skilled immigrants? Are those always good? I mean, are those always immigrants that you want? In the United States, most people don't have problems with immigrants like that. Like, nobody seems to have a problem with me. I have a PhD, I have some skills, I speak the language, so nobody ever looked at me as if I'm coming and taking somebody's job. But can that be the case somewhere else, perhaps, or under other conditions? Well, interestingly, it can. In South America, for example, South Africa, for example, the problem is the opposite. In South Africa, locals usually are deprived of many growth opportunities because most of the good jobs, like doctors, lawyers, engineers, are actually immigrants from Europe and from North America and from Australia. Unfortunately, they don't have problems with cheap immigrants from other African countries. In fact, there are enough poor people internally to fill those jobs, and so hardly anyone wants to immigrate there. But the better jobs are the ones that are preserved for immigrants from those developed countries. And so those are the immigrants that locals have problems with. Those are the immigrants that say, oh, we don't want more of you guys because you steal the better jobs. We don't mind poor and uneducated immigrants. Those are no threat to us. We can deal with those. We're better than those. We can take those jobs. But the highly educated immigrants, that's the ones that we have a problem with. And so interestingly enough, actually skilled immigrants may be a problem. So there we go. So now let's talk about immigrant labor, but specifically about unqualified, unskilled labor. So nobody argues that brain drain is economically beneficial. So we want people who are highly skilled. Not much to be said there. That is understood and agreed upon. Let's talk about the controversial issues that are perceived, a problem. So let's talk about basically unskilled laborers, and again, I will be stereotypical here, from Latin America, or whatever region they come from, Asia or Africa or Eastern Europe, whatever you are concerned about. And again, in the United States, it would be primarily people from, let's say, Mexico or Cuba. But then again, in other regions of the world, the unqualified labor would be from, from their own regions. Willing to work for less, is that a good thing or a bad thing? There is, by the way, a little video here, 4 minutes or 5 minutes, that talks about cheap unskilled labor, and so I recommend that you at some time watch it and look at it. The video basically, the kind of the punchline is that Walmart, the Homeland Security detained illegal immigrants working at Walmart, and so Conan Bryan interviews some, Jon Stewart interviews some shoppers, and one woman says, well, I'm stunned that they would employ illegal immigrants for nearly no pay. And then the guy says, well, lady, you just bought a sweatshirt there for 29 cents. Something's got to give. And so at the very least, when we talk about cheap labor, we should recognize that it's also labor that does work for us for less. And so that lowers our cost of living. And so at the very least that makes it a little bit richer. But let's again, obviously there is more to be said here, so let's discuss that. Um, the positives are in green, the negatives are in red. And again, even though I'm talking a lot about positives of immigration, I do recognize the negatives. Don't get me wrong. And so I do list all of those too. It's just that those are usually widely recognized and it's nothing new. And so when I say that, you probably overlook that and just focus on the new things that I say, and those would be the positives. And so that may create an impression that I'm all for, illegal immigration. No, I'm not. Plus, again, talking about illegal immigration, by definition, it's illegal, and right there, it's bad. So we shouldn't be even talking about that because that's the period, that's stop. But if we have to, and we have what we have, and the truth is that there are many millions of illegal immigrants in the United States, and so there is no magic wand that we can wave and make those people disappear. And therefore, I guess it is appropriate to talk about economic effects of illegal immigration. And so one of the biggest concerns is that people who come here, unqualified, unskilled, or even illegally, are willing to work for less. And the question is it good or bad, right? And so let's see about that. Well, obviously they are willing to work for less, and so obviously that lowers wages overall, no question about that. But at the same time, it also means that those who they work for less for have greater savings. Be it your loan is mowed for less, or something is done at your company for less. That means that we, the consumers, or you, the business owners, have to spend less money, and every time we spend less money, we have more money left in our pocket to spend on something else, which means the demand on something else will increase, which means wages there will increase too. So yes, they may lower wages, but as I said, indirectly, consequently, they may increase wages. Also, cheaper labor means more profitable, more competitive, and growing businesses. Would, for example, I don't know, GM be where it is today, or any other company, if they couldn't hire cheaper immigrants? And again, I'm not necessarily talking here about illegal immigrants who are cheaper in general. Well, obviously it would be a little bit difficult for them. So like American farmers, entrepreneurs, producers can earn much more by employing cheap immigrant labor. And those too are Americans, owners of those businesses. And so they definitely win. Who said that they are less important Americans? So again, overall, I definitely recognize this problem in red, but at the same time, please do recognize these advantages in green. And so when you are hiring an immigrant, for example, to mow your lawn for $10, when you have to pay 25 for an American doing the same job, you are in a sense taking an American job and giving it to an immigrant. But at the same time, you're saving $15 that you can now spend on a massage, or buy a book by an American writer, or buy an American-made perfume. And so that creates demand for American jobs. And so while you take an American job here, you create it there. And so the job you take, mowing lawns, is that really the jobs that you want for Americans? Or perhaps paying Americans that are, as I said, write books, I don't know, whatever else they may do. Maybe those jobs are equally good, or maybe even better. Just keep that in mind. Here's another joke video, and I'll put all those in Dropbox. Just watch that. And but again, the main idea here is that we all love to complain about, like, for example, China and immigrants taking our jobs and stuff like that. But when the time comes to buy something at the store, you have a pen made in China and made in the United States, equally good, but this one's cheaper. Which one would you buy? So it's easy to complain, but nobody forces nobody to buy stuff made in China, or services provided by immigrants, or that cost lower because the companies employ immigrants. Americans come to the store, compare prices, do some analysis, and if you believe in freedom of choice, well, then that's basically what we see. Here is another question for you. And the correct answer is D. Immigrants, they would hurt domestic and international competitors of the companies that hire low-wage immigrants. And I believe here it says low-wage immigrants. It should be low-wage immigrants. Where is it? Yeah, right here. Lower-wage immigrants. So here we go. Um, this is a joke I'll skip, but if you want to pause and watch, you're welcome to do so. Now, the most controversial issue. Most people would say, yeah, I don't have problems with immigrants, including low skill, immigrants or no skill immigrants. What I have a problem with is illegal immigration. And at the very least, you are correct because illegal is illegal, and so that's definitely bad. I by no means support illegal immigration. But again, if I have to talk about economic effects of illegal immigration, here is what I have to say. Um, some, perhaps even unethical or unlawful people who focus exclusively at economic effects, many of them actually say that illegal immigration is highly beneficial. Illegal immigrants will work for you hard, will not expect any type of extra benefits and all those goodies that many people get, and so at least you as a business owner and you as a consumer benefit from that. Here is a specific example. There was a big scandal in Los Angeles some time ago. The mayor of the city was accused of hiring illegal immigrants to build highways. Now, when the guy was put on the stand, he said something like this. He said, well, you know what? I have a very limited budget, and I have a huge problem with traffic in LA. And if you ever drove in LA, you probably know what he's talking about. I can hire locals, but it will cost me a lot, and I will not be able to build many roads. I can hire illegal immigrants for nearly no pay, and I will be able to provide services to the citizens of this city. What would you do? I chose to provide the services and lower my cost by hiring illegal immigrants. Now, was he right or was he wrong? I don't know. I kind of think that he was still wrong because breaking the law is unforgivable. But I hope you also see some logic in his words and, think about it. Now, the latest developments, for example, when we talk about swine flu, immigration, and cost of food. As you know, a few years ago there was this outbreak of swine flu, and presumably it came from Latin America. And that was used by many politicians as an opportunity and lobby groups to limit immigration from Mexico, particularly immigration of seasonal agricultural workers, as well as all kinds of other immigrants. The idea was that they have this virus there, and maybe we should just limit number of people, and by doing so maybe create more jobs for Americans because there will be fewer immigrants coming and stealing the jobs. There have been even rallies for that and stuff like that, and many people thought, oh wonderful, we're going to solve all our economic problems. The thing is that most farmers bring 10 to 100 seasonal immigrant workers during the harvest time from Mexico. But it is not just bringing them, it's to help them harvest crops. When the talks became serious about those seasonal workers not coming anymore, farmers actually went on march in Washington D.C. in front of the White House, in front of Congress, and said, are you crazy? If we can't get those people, what's going to happen is this. Much of the crop will stay on the fields, we will lose money, we will lose our farms, and you will have to pay much more for food because without those seasonal workers, much food will be lost and the prices will increase dramatically. So that's what we talk here about complementation. A farmer can do much work, but sometimes, like for those few weeks, he needs a lot of help, and without that help, seasonal help, he's screwed and everybody else is screwed. And so while it looks like a good idea to limit the number of those people who come here only to take jobs and take all of their money back with them, the thing is that it's not going to help anyone. In fact, the only thing is it's going to hurt everyone who eats. If you eat, it would hurt you, as well as those who provide that food, because that's their living, and they will not have a good, easy chance of, providing that kind of stuff. The same thing, again, kind of controversial. We talked about the Polish plumber, and here is the story again. So in Europe, the concern is about immigrants from Eastern Europe who come and take jobs for less pay. And so a French official once was caught hiring Polish plumbers, and so he was put on stand and asked, what are you doing? And he said, well, you know what, I saved a lot of money today because those guys did a great job and saved me 50 euros, for example. I don't mind. Everyone was very upset about that, but again, if you think about that, everyone shouldn't be upset. Who should be upset are the plumbers, who now have more competition and have to do either a much better job or a job for a lower pay. But then consumers, on the other hand, win a lot, and so they should be happy about the lower prices. Plus, everybody else should also be happy, because if I save on plumbing, that means I can save more on whatever you make, and so that's a big deal too. So again, it's kind of a duality here, and what people see is this red, but what they don't see is this green. And so the same thing was also with farmers in Europe. Again, some people said that those people are coming and stealing our jobs, but then there was an outrage among farmers who said, and construction companies who said, you know what, if we can't get those cheap, let's say, Polish or Ukrainian plumbers and construction workers and farming workers, we will be out of business. I mean, we will lose to, the same Mexico and then North Africa and Ukraine and those other countries that have also natural resources to, grow food and build houses and stuff like that. So without those cheaper guys, we will be out of business. Is that what you want? And so again, like trade unions kind of lose, but then many people depend on that kind of help, and so they would go out of business if there was no cheap immigrant labor. So just think about interest groups here, and remember that if somebody's crying about losses, in many cases that's losses not of the society as a whole, but of a specific interest group. But then again, if you prevent those losses, that would be at the expense of other people, and so that's very important. Now, this is a negative thing. Reaping benefits. As we've discussed, immigrants really pay most of the taxes, and by most I mean like literally almost all. There is no way not to pay taxes. Also, we've established that immigrants don't really have that many opportunities to reap the benefits, particularly the illegal immigrants. They wouldn't be eligible for social security, they wouldn't be eligible for Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff. And yes, I've heard stories that some of them fake documents and still get eligible, but again, I don't know. I wouldn't know how to do it, and I'm not sure if they know, but something's telling me most of them just never get those benefits and kind of stay low and work for minimum wage and just try not to be kicked out of the country. But in the United States, that has probably the lowest level of social benefits of all developed countries. There are countries on this planet that actually offer huge, lavish benefits, and so like Northern Europe, Denmark, Sweden, even Canada a little bit, but Canada is much more like the United States, but again, even that country has a little bit more social support than the United States. And in those countries, illegal, particularly immigration, may be a problem. I mean, in North Europe, unemployment benefits are huge. Child care support benefits are huge, and so once you have a few children, you don't really have to work anymore, and that's what many immigrants choose to do. And when that happens, that may be a problem. And so for Northern European countries, the burden is actually huge, unlike in the United States. And so in the United States, as I showed you the numbers, if all those illegal immigrants or legal immigrants who reap the benefits and don't pay taxes disappeared, not going to save any problems. I mean, that's at the best you will be better off financially by 1%, so it's not definitely not a solution. But in North European countries, in some countries, that's a substantial part of the budget, and that actually may be a big problem. And so for them, that's much more of a concern, and maybe even at least partial solution to the problem. Money outflow. Again, many people say that immigrants come, work here, but send all the money back. Well, here I'm speculating, but I believe my numbers are fairly accurate. The claim is that immigrants send money back and thus don't create jobs in the United States. Well, the reality is that life in the United States is very expensive. Even if 3 people live in the same room and eat nothing but rice, it's going to be probably at least, I don't know, $800 per month, $1,000 per month per person. Still a lot of money. You still have to pay for your room, for food, for transportation, for clothing, and all that stuff. And I don't know, maybe my expenses are higher, but I just can't imagine how anyone can live on less than that amount per month. And that amount per month, that gives you what, like $12,000 a year. Now, how many illegal immigrants make more than that? I've heard stories that some of them have a decent, pay, 20, even 30-something thousand. But something's telling me that, again, I don't know much about illegal immigration, I admit. But I don't think that working illegally, you can make more than, what, $10 an hour. And at that pay, you would make, what, $15,000 a year or something like that. And, that's presumably that you have full-time employment. Most illegal immigrants, work, they work. So today they have a job, tomorrow they may not have a job. And so the thing is that there is really not much left to send back home. According to my calculations, I mean, how much can you send? Maybe a few $100 now and then, maybe per month. So it's not really going to be, again, a deal breaker for the United States if all that money stopped leaving the United States. And then forget that much of that money is actually spent in, for example, Mexico, on American cars, on American stuff. So in a sense, it comes back in the form of profits of American companies. So I wouldn't really, not that I wouldn't worry about that. It just, keep the reality in check, and don't let fool yourself when somebody tells you that this is the cause of American economic problems, and by solving this problem you will solve America's problems. No, it's definitely not a solution. It is also true, and I put it in red, that immigrants, as I said, tend to be poorer, especially illegal immigrants, and as a result that's definitely breeds crime and all kinds of problems. Now the thing is, and it's a horrible thing to say, I hope you will never quote me on this, but the reality is such that an illegal immigrant, in a sense, is a better immigrant, because once the person here is legally, the person is eligible for Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, all that stuff. And by the lack of knowledge and skills, a disproportionately large number of immigrants, or percentage of people among the immigrants, get on all those welfare programs. Now overall, I mean, there are a vastly larger number of Americans in those programs as opposed to immigrants. But again, there are quite a few immigrants, and as a total percentage of population, native born versus immigrants, obviously the percentage of immigrants there would be somewhat higher, or maybe even substantially higher. And when that is the case, then yes, immigration may actually be a problem in this area. And so yeah, that's the horrible thing that I wanted to say is that you kind of almost want all immigrants to be illegal, because then they would be not eligible for all those services. But again, I don't think that would be a solution, because the reason we have those services is not because we're so generous, but because we know that's good for the society, because you and especially you may lose your job one day, or may be in a car accident. And so we don't want you to be bankrupt at that time. We don't want you to die at that time. We don't want you to ruin your life. And therefore we have that Medicaid for you, so that you can get through those tough times and become a productive member of the society again. We want your kids to go to school even if you don't have money to pay for that, because we want that what makes the society better. So it's not because we love you so much and we are so humane. We want that because that's what makes us better off. And so it's questionable whether or not you would like to offer that to illegal immigrants, but again, and I already told you why you might want to offer that even to illegal immigrants. But if you believe that no, it shouldn't be, then yes, you are right, because that creates some problems. Here is some math in terms of how much an immigrant takes and how much an immigrant gives. Let's take two people here, hypothetical people. One is this guy Bas Terras, who is a professor of international business, and here is a guy who is Jose Gonzalez from Mexico, and he is an illegal immigrant in the United States. Completely made up people. Well, right, okay, one of them is not made up, this one is me, but the reason I use myself is because I know my expenses. And so let's see what I take and what I give back to the society. Well, I take one job, and so it could have been given to an American, and I don't think there are many unemployed business PhDs in the United States, so it doesn't really mean that I displaced someone, but it could have been a good job for an American, and so I took that job. Now I do create demand. I have a car, I have a house. Actually I have two. I'm still not able to sell my old one, so I'm trying to sell it for a year now. Anyone needs a wonderful three bedroom, 3 bathroom townhouse, have one, trying to sell. But anyway, so I have those, and I pay all the property taxes and maintenance, all that stuff on those houses. I do eat, I have some furniture, I buy apparel, I go to gym, I have an internet connection, phone, entertainment, all that stuff. So I'm spending about $50,000 a year on that, my family. Now my spouse is not allowed to work. She is so-called a TD, since I'm here on a work visa, my spouse is not allowed to work, at least until I become permanent resident, which who knows when it's going to happen. And so, but she's allowed to shop, and so she spends a lot of money, plus she takes courses at the UNCG, since she's actually a student at this time, and she pays out-of-state tuition, and it's a lot of money, and so that's basically the rest of my salary. Now I have one kid in school, and it's free, Texas, but I have one kid in a daycare, and so that's something I pay for. So that's about $750 per month, and so in a sense I create at least some jobs there for caregivers. Now I budget expenses well. I mean my visa probably, but I do pay application fees, so I'm not even sure if that's a burden for the budget. So I guess I pay taxes in full, but the budget really does much for me as far as processing. Now I do budget contributions. I pay my income tax, my sales tax, my property tax, my vehicle tax. So all of those I pay diligently, and in fact even if I didn't want to pay them, there is no way I can escape. It's not like I have to write a check. I just pay those taxes automatically. I would like to believe that I create new directions in business, through my research, through my training, and hopefully that will help people here in the United States develop better programs, better management systems, better training tools, and I educate you, and hopefully that will make you better, productive people. And so by doing so, I hope I improve productivity of the society, as well as I hope that my skills complement skills of others. Like for example, the other day, about 2 months ago, I ran a training session for UNCG employees. So I had about 20 people in the audience, all kinds of departments, and so that's staff, UNCG staff, and I ran a training session, half-a-day training session for them. And again, hopefully what I bring to the table complements what they already know, and so hopefully that makes them more productive overall. So on balance, I took one high-skilled job, and so that job pays very well. It's a 6-figure salary. But then I also hope that I created at least 2 medium-skilled jobs. I mean, I do spend most of my money that is, in fact, I spend all of my money that is not tax on mortgage, on my expenses, and so that's at least some jobs created there. So because I create that demand, and so on the balance, I suppose that I create some jobs, I take some jobs, so I'm probably contributing at least as much as I take from the society. And then if you believe that I'm creating some new directions, some new knowledge, which I'd like to believe I do, then through productivity and everything else, I'm actually creating even more. So I'm thinking based on these numbers, I'm not a burden for the society. I'm actually be an asset. At the very least, I'm compensating the society for what I take from the society. Now let's take a look at Jose, and again, it's very stereotypical. I know I don't want to be that, but I deliberately am stereotypical this time, so that we face the stereotypes head on. So I don't want to be politically correct here. I want to talk about the things that people are concerned. So let's get directly to the business. And so let's have a hypothetical person here who is in the United States illegally. Now he took one job. He works. And there are many unemployed, low-skilled Americans who could have taken that job. I mean, unemployment is high. And even though we sometimes say that they take the jobs that we don't want to take, well, who knows? Maybe there is a guy in America who wants to take that job, and Jose took that job. Now he also takes the job for less money, and so therefore he basically reduces the wages of the locals. And studies show, and by the way, I have a few studies of that type attached in the optional readings, that illegal immigrants, illegal immigrants, low-skilled immigrants may reduce wages of low-skill job sector by 0.2 to 0.9%. So there is no effect on wages in high-skill sector, but they may reduce by a tiny amount, but still by some amount, jobs that are low-skill, basically like high school graduates type of jobs. Now his skills complement those of Americans in construction, maintenance, manufacturing, catering, farming, and so on and so on. So by working, for example, for that Farmer Joe, Jose is actually helping Farmer Joe to become richer, because without Jose, Farmer Joe wouldn't be able to be as productive and wouldn't be able to make so much money. So that's a good thing. Now Jose has a car, a house, or at least he rents a house and rides a car sometimes. He eats, he has some furniture, he has some clothing. I put here goes to the gym, but let's assume he doesn't. Internet, phone, who knows, maybe he doesn't, but let's assume he does, because I assume most illegal immigrants have some of those. And then maybe at least sometimes he goes to a movie or rents a Redbox DVD. And let's say that costs him about $10,000 a year, and I can't really see how you can live on less than that. So that's something that he sends into the economy, basically creates demand for that stuff. Now, because of him, there is more need for law enforcement, and I'm not saying that Jose is a criminal, but you know, all those Homeland Security and stuff like that have a little bit more work. Plus, he has kids, and those kids are in school, and so Jose, unfortunately, you know, basically gets that kids in school for free. But then at the same time, he's not eligible for most services, subsidies, so no Medicare, no Medicaid. But let's say he has one emergency every 1 year, which costs $1,000 in treatment, and he goes, he gets the treatment, but never pays the money. Now, budget contributions, he pays sales tax, obviously he pays property tax, vehicle tax, no way around that. But let's say the farmer Joe pays him cash, and Jose never pays the taxes, so that's a problem. Now, let's say he sends back home every month $250, which is roughly $2,000 to $3,000 a year. Now, he's willing to work for $5 to $10 an hour, as opposed to $10 to $20 an hour in low-skilled job that an American would demand. So by doing so per year, he saves Americans $15,000 if you think about that. Now, the money is then reinvested in other products and services that Americans now have money to spend on. And if we do some math, then we can see that Jose creates about $10,000 in demand, about $15,000 in savings, that essentially is indirect demand, but then minus $3,000 that he sends back home, plus minus $1,000 that he doesn't pay in medical bills. On the balance, what we have here is that actually he creates one $21,000 a year low-skill job. And so if we look at those numbers, then we actually see that he took one job that is $15,000 to $20,000 a year, but by saving us, the consumers, money, by helping Farmer Joe, by creating some demand, you know, through his needs for food and apparel, he actually creates demand for pretty much the same amount of money, or maybe even a larger amount. So even a guy like this actually is equally beneficial for the society, or maybe even more, contributing more than he's actually taken from the society. So by kicking him out, yes, you would get that one low-skill job with the farmer, you know, that he took, but you would lose also these jobs. And so the problem that I have is not, I'm not saying that illegal immigration is good or, you know, bad or anything like that. I'm just saying that what we see is this line here, and what we don't see is this line here. You hear so much about this. I mean, you hear a lot about that. In fact, too much about that. But what you don't hear is this. And as my math here shows, this is a huge amount of money, and it's equally important. And if you kick out Jose and others, no problems will be solved. And if my math here is correct, actually problems will be created. Frankly, I don't think that the Homeland Security, the police, have no means of expelling all illegal immigrants from the United States. I mean, I don't know where to find them, but I'm sure it would be not too difficult. I mean, obviously, you know, most of you probably know where to look for them. I think the reason they are here, and I think the reason the law enforcement is not taking a tough stand and not sending them home, is because somebody in that department actually runs this math. Somebody who's responsible for the U.S. economy actually runs this math, and they understand that it's not going to solve anything, and probably it's going to create some new problems, and maybe even huge some new problems. And so while in the election season to you they say, oh yeah, we got to do something about that because this is what you want to hear, but at the same time they understand too well that that's not a problem, not the solution, and at the same time it may be a problem if, you know, something will be done about it, you know, like the public demands, just kick them out of the country. Keep that in mind. Don't also forget that cheap immigrant labor makes American companies more competitive in the global arena. And again, American companies, company owners, managers are equally important for America. And so without that cheap immigrant labor, the only chance for them to remain competitive would be to outsource jobs to China. And obviously that's worse than you know, immigrants, because Chinese employees would be spending money in China, whereas immigrants would be spending money here, and that's an important thing. So yes, made in the United States versus made in China. So immigrants, that's like domestic outsourcing. You send jobs back here in America, in the United States, whereas real outsourcing is sending jobs there. And while there is no other way around, I mean, if you want to stay competitive, I mean, it's not the 60s and 70s anymore. It would be nice to go back in those years, but no, today the world is global. And so you have a choice here about either importing cheaper immigrants or exporting jobs. And economically, obviously, importing cheaper immigrants is better than exporting jobs. Um, we talked about that. I'm gonna skip it, but if if you have time, just read it again. And so the same thing again, path to citizenship for illegal immigrants. Should they be given a chance to get the citizenship or not? Illegal immigrants. Um, Controversial issue. I frankly, I don't know what to say about it. I mean, I'm very much against people who break the law, and even if it's economically feasible, I still believe the law is the law, and so I would probably vote no path to citizenship for illegal immigrants. Um, I guess that would be the right decision. But let me review economic benefits and disadvantages of giving them that path. So you know the DREAM Act failed in late 2010. Obama was trying to give children of illegal immigrants a path to citizenship, and it didn't work out. The political motives were, well, again, proponents said that it would be a good thing so that they can get votes of Mexican electoral base, but then opponents wanted to fight for votes of those who are anti-immigration citizens of the United States, and so that was the political stuff. But then in terms of economics, so, well, we talked about opponents' arguments like not fair. It would be a wrong signal to those who are still planning to come. We would basically tell them that, well, you know what, these guys got the citizenship, maybe you should come too, maybe you'll get one day too. And so also once you legalize those illegal immigrants, all of a sudden they will become more competitive in terms of, they will be allowed to work without keeping low profile, they will be eligible for all those Medicare, Medicaid, and obviously it would be a huge problem. But then those who support this idea, they say, well, and this is very important, we are concerned about immigrants taking jobs, right? Right. We kind of wish that they didn't take those jobs. But at the same time, gosh, I hope you recognize that it's much better to have a member of a society who works than a member of a society who doesn't. In other words, it's much better to have a guy in your village who does some work than a guy in your village who doesn't. Imagine that the country is a village and a stranger comes in. Do you want that guy to sit around all day and do nothing, or do you want that guy to actually help something, clean up the streets maybe, or do something else? Obviously you want that guy to work. Now, if the guy is not allowed to work, the only way he can work is secretly, keeping the low profile. That's basically what illegal immigrants have to do in the United States, in any country. The problem is that if that's the only way they can work, they cannot maximize their, fulfill their potential. What if, and statistically speaking, this is a, big probability. There are some guys among those illegal immigrants who can be the next Bill Gates, Einstein, or just a, entrepreneur, construction business owner, or something else. The thing is that those guys are not allowed to open accounts, or at least, it's very difficult to do it for them. They're not allowed to start a business. They're not allowed to hire other people. They are not allowed to do just about anything that may lead to maximizing their contribution to the society. And so by not letting those guys become legalized, we are basically forcing them to contribute only this little to the society. And many of them maybe would be happy to go to school and train and do more for the society. Maybe many of them would be happy to pay for that school. Maybe many of them would be happy to, start a business, hire other people, but we don't let them to do that. And so those who support the idea of giving a path to the citizenship to those who are here illegally, they say, you know what, that will allow us to solve more problems. And don't be afraid about that competition, because, those people will have a chance not only do better for themselves, but by doing better for themselves, they actually do more for the society. They are more productive, and the reason they will do better for themselves is because we will be willing to pay them more, and we will be able and willing to pay them more because they will be doing more for us. And so again, I don't think that breaking a law is forgivable, and I don't think it would be, as I said, I'm torn here, but I definitely can see both the opponent's arguments as well as the supporters' arguments. And if you look at the supporters' arguments, it's pure economy. So whereas if you look at the opponent's arguments, it's more, ideology. And so the question is, what's more important for you, better life or ideology? I don't know. I mean, I leave it with you. I frankly don't know what to say to this one. I gave you something to think about. We talked about baby boomers retiring. So unfortunately for the United States, a huge portion of the population will retire within the next few years, and so the only way to kind of preserve the balance in the society and standards of living is to, basically either pay higher taxes or have more employees. And since it's too late to make babies now, to smooth that transition, you basically need immigrants. And Canada has announced plans of increasing immigration, and unfortunately it looks like the United States will have to follow that same path, or else, or problems in economy are inevitable. Now, I have here a few interesting projects, and it's going to take a few minutes for me to share them with you, but I do believe that I need to share them with you. I ran a study, an experimental study, that shows how people often talk about immigration particularly, but also international trade and job outsourcing, purely based on ideology and not based on science or numbers or economic analysis. And I wish I could run this experiment with you, but you gotta trust me that when I do it, this is the numbers I get. This is, on the one hand, it's interesting. On the other hand, it's amazing. But at the same time, it's almost scary what the results of these experiments show me. It basically shows that people force politicians to make some decisions based on something that those people never even thought about. I mean, this is a big deal. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of those experiments that are run. Imagine a situation where there is 1 million people in Canada, or not million, let's say 1,000 people in Canada, who, let's say, love America so much that they decide to do something for America. And so let's say those people decided to come every morning into the United States, their lunch bags in hand, and decided to do for Americans whatever they can, clean the streets, babysit kids, whatever you ask them to do. Like, for example, I could use some help now remodeling my house, and the guy says, sure, yeah, I'll sweep the floor, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. You perhaps have a child, and that child may need some daycare help, and the Canadian says, sure, I will babysit your child. Somebody maybe of you is in school studying hard, and the Canadian says, you know what, I'll cook for you for free while you're in school, so that when you come home there is a free good hot meal waiting for you. And yes, you'll pay for the food, I mean for the ingredients, but I'll do the cooking for free, so you don't have to spend on eating out. The question is, would that be good for America or bad for America? So those guys come in Canada every morning and go home every night. And obviously it's a hypothetical example. It's not happening in reality. Imagine that was happening. So if they would come and help Americans in any way they can every morning, like do whatever, clean the shore on the Pacific Sea or Pacific Ocean, as I said, babysit, clean your house, help with remodeling, whatever they can do just to help Americans. The question is, if they did it completely for free, would that be good or bad? Well, 99% of my respondents, and I've done it with multiple samples, said that yes, it would be good. Now imagine that over time those people become a little greedy. And let's say over time they decide to charge 2 cents per day for what they do. You need a babysitter? Well, it's going to be 2 cents a day. You need to sweep your floor or prepare your food for you or whatever else, give you a massage and whatever other services you may need. It's going to cost you 2 cents per day. Is that still good for America or bad for America? 99% of the students say, well, it's still good. How about $1 a day? Again, 99% of my respondents say it's good. How about $10 a day? At that stage, you see that some say, not sure about that. That's a little tricky. How about $20 a day, $30 a day? At some point, I reach a point where most respondents say, no, it's not good for America. At that point, no, it's definitely not something that we want. Now, the amazing thing about that is what? Think about it. The amazing thing about this experiment is that we all complain about immigrants coming and willing to work for less. And we don't like that very much. We, hate it sometimes. We think that that's the problem that we have. But the thing is that when you ask people that same question, phrased in terms of numbers, not in terms of ideology, they all of a sudden completely flip their opinion. Like in this experiment, when you give people the numbers, they don't have problems with people coming and working here for free. They don't have problems with people coming here and working for nearly no pay, 2 cents or $1 a day. But when the price increases, people all of a sudden say, oh no, that's not what we want, that's not what's good for us. Think about that. If you phrase the problem not in the context of immigration, but if you phrase this problem in the context of, pure economy, the opinion about what's good for America and what's bad for America completely changes. Completely changes. This is serious. I mean, this is almost scary because it tells me that when people talk about those issues, they never run the numbers. They never look at the economic effects. They never do the economic analysis. They purely go by ideology, and they never even notice that. Here is another experiment that I do, and again, this is basically the same idea. China has been doing much research lately and becoming more advanced, and so China develops what they call CX-1. It's a humanoid robot that doesn't really look like a human, but it has 2 hands and 2 legs and can walk and can do simple manual labor. And so China sees that the United States is in trouble. Again, it's a hypothetical story. Obviously, it's not true, but imagine that was true, that were true, right? So China decides, looks at the United States and sees that America is hurting. Economically, America is not doing very well now, and China being the greatest and the biggest America's creditor, they think, you know what, we got to help America here, because if something happens to America, we're never going to see our money back. So they have that robot that can do just about anything, and they think, you know what, we're going to send those robots to the United States, and so those robots can do just about anything a human can do. So they will, cook for you and babysit for you and clean your house for you and drive you to school and maybe repair your car and maybe repair your house and maybe, whatever else other help you need. And so they decide to send 1 million of those to America, and like if you're a business owner, construction, one of those robots may be helping you build houses. If you're a student, maybe one of those robots will be cooking for you. If you're a parent, maybe one of those robots will be babysitting your child. If you are, a guy in need of a haircut or a massage, well, that robot can do that for you, so you don't have to spend your money. The question is, would that be good for America or bad for America? 99% of the students say it would be good. Then, well, the trick is that it turns out that robots needs some maintenance, and it's about 1 cent a day. They work off solar energy, and they have a super powerful quantum computer in their head, but you still have sometimes, oil them, and so that doesn't cost much, but it costs something. The question is, would that still be good for America or bad for America? Well, most people say it's still good. Obviously, I would like that. I don't mind paying 1 cent a day. Well, over time, the robots become a little bit older, and maintenance becomes more expensive, and so it costs you $5 a day to maintain those robots. Would that be still good enough? $10, $15, $20 a day, $50 a day, $100 a day. Would that still be good for America or bad for America? Again, roughly at about $10, $15 a day, there is a drop in percentage from 99 good for America to lower. And when you reach about $30, $40 a day, many respondents would actually say, no, I don't think that would be good for America at that time. Now, the truth is, and I give that in condition B to my students or respondents, it's kind of this additional scenario says that, a reporter from New York Times decides to find out what exactly is going on there. And so one night she sneaks into the barn where those robots are, spending the night. And she amazingly, for herself, discovers that those are not robots. Those are illegal immigrants from China disguised as robots. And so she prints the story, and now you know what's really going on. So that's $10, $20 a day that you had to pay for maintenance was really a pay for those illegal immigrants. And so they're not robots, they're just illegal immigrants from China. The question is it still good for America or is it bad for America? The responses flip completely, and 90% of my respondents say, no, that's bad for America. Now, the reason I'm very concerned about those results is because nothing changed in terms of numbers. You still have the same help for the same money. But what changed was we rephrased the problem from from technological advancement to immigration. And when people hear the word immigration, they all of a sudden become very unsupportive of the idea, whereas they were perfectly fine with that from the economic perspective when the same numbers, the same figures were given to them and in the context of technology. And so what concerns me is that it turns out that we make those decisions about, for example, immigration not based on economic analysis, because nothing changed in terms of economy in this question. We make them purely based on emotions and ideology, and I don't think we can make those decisions based on emotions and ideology. And so that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Anyway, effects of immigration. I wouldn't say that it's bad or good. I would say it's a matter of degree, and there are always some positives and some negatives, and I'll give you one last story, to finish up the lecture. Imagine that Mexico loved the United States so much that they decided to give a truckload of gold to America. They loaded a whole truck with gold, and they just sent all that money or all that gold to the United States. The question is it good for America or bad for America that America sent a whole load of truck of gold to America? Well, obviously it's good. I mean, who wouldn't want a truckload of gold? Now imagine that the driver of that truck never went back to Mexico. The guy, once he entered the United States, he left the truck, and while the truck was being unloaded, the guy just basically sneaked out and hid in the United States and never went home, stayed here illegally. Would that still be good for America or bad for America? Well, I don't know about you, but I'd say, yeah, it's still good. It's still worth it. How about his wife also came with him, hidden somewhere in the cabin of the car, and and she also stayed in the United States. Is that still good or bad? How about he also hid his children in the glove compartment there somewhere, and they also stayed in America? Is that still good or bad? What about, I don't know, his neighbor was, hiding somewhere in the, among that gold in the bed of the car. Is that still going to be good or bad? Well, it turns out there were 5 neighbors. Maybe there was one hiding somewhere, I don't know, in the fuel tank. Maybe someone was hiding, I don't know, in the tires, somewhere else. Well, as I add the number of people, at some point some respondents say, you know what, no, at this point we don't want your gold. At this point, take your gold back, and we don't want all those people illegally here. The question is, at which point do you draw the line? At some time it's definitely beneficial, but after some point it becomes too much problem. And so that's exactly the issue with immigration. There are some positives, there are some negatives. The question is, where is the balance? Because as we discussed, some are highly beneficial, some are highly non-beneficial. The question is, where do you draw that line? Anyway, your last question? And the correct answer to this one is D, the last one. Read when you have a second. And this is what you need to know on the exam. Thank you very much. You're now ready to write your homework.